Hello and welcome to Birth as We Know It. I am your podcast host, Kiona Nessenbaum. I have experienced birth as a doula, a student midwife, and as a mother of 3 amazing children with my husband and high school sweetheart by my side. After attending over 130 births, including my own, I've realized that each birth experience is truly unique. So make sure you subscribe and join me every week as we are guided through many different birth experiences through the lens of the storyteller. Please be aware that some of the stories can be triggering to hear, so feel free to pause, take a breath, and come back and listen whenever you're ready. With that said, let's prep ourselves to dive deep and get detailed about what really happens in the birth space. As a reminder, this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and has no intention of giving or replacing any medical advice. All advice that is given on the podcast is from the personal experiences of the storytellers. All medical or health-related questions should be directed to your licensed provider. Before we dive deep into this episode, I want to thank my cousin Nicole for becoming a patron/member on my Patreon account. Nikki, thank you so much for supporting me by becoming a member, and I do truly appreciate it. You are making it possible for me to continue to produce this podcast and to access the resources that will help it just continue to grow and make it better. So thank you so much. I truly appreciate you. I also want to give another friendly reminder to grab some tea, take a good seat, because this is going to be a lengthy episode. And just know that if you don't sit down and listen to it all at one sitting, which could be challenging, don't forget to come back, because you're going to want to listen to all of this story, because it is definitely going to pull your heartstrings and it's definitely worth listening to. So stay tuned and enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Birth as We Know It podcast. Today, I am super excited to have 2 amazing human beings on my podcast today. Today, I am interviewing Krista and Katie, and they are 2 wonderful people who have been on this journey of surrogacy together. Katie is the gestational carrier of the surrogate baby, and Krista is the mom. Yeah? Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, awesome. So this is a new topic for me, and I'm super excited to dive into this and see what your journey has been like. I have intentionally not looked at anything you guys have posted on Instagram because I want to get all the juicy details directly from y'all. So welcome, and Krista, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, I'm Krista. In my family, there are my husband, Crispin, and I have 2 kids now. The latest is Cadie, but her full name is Arcadia, and she's 8 weeks old. She is our baby that we just had by a surrogacy that Katie just had.
Yeah.
Big Katie. It's 2 Katies, so it's a little confusing. Katie, my daughter's name is spelled Cadie, short for Arcadia. And then I also have a 9-year-old son who I was able to carry and birth, and his name is Calder.
That's great. All right, Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am the gestational carrier to this big family journey. I live in West Seattle with my husband, and I have 2 kids that I birthed. I have an 8-year-old, almost 8-year-old daughter, Delphine, and a 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old, Kelson. Both babies kind of led me on my birth journey, and they were both born at home. And so I was like, well, let's carry a baby for someone else and birth them at home too. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into this thing. But I'm also a doula, a childbirth educator, and a birth photographer. So I am all things birth. I love birth.
Oh, that is so awesome. Man, we're already starting off with almost putting me in tears over here because Katie birthed a Katie, even though the spelling is different. I just think that that's so awesome. That's so, so cool. I am super excited to dive into this. And so, Krista, I'm going to ask you, have you ever attended a birth prior to your own?
I have not attended. I don't think I was in the room, but my mom had 2 home births in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was in the house, but I don't believe I was in the room. So that was my closest experience with birth, but no, I had never been in the room for birth, aside from my 9-year-old, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Katie, we're going to ask you a few questions in a minute, but Krista, I'd love to dive into what your pregnancy journey was with your 9-year-old.
So 9 years ago, I had my son Calder, and I used a midwife for that pregnancy. The midwife my mother had used for her last 3 births. I'm the second of 7 children, so a really big family. The last 3 my mom had were with a midwife, and when I became pregnant with my son, I really wanted to use a midwife as well, and so I got in contact with her. She was sort of the end of her career. She's now retired. But I reached out to her, and she provided care for me during my pregnancy. And then at 37 weeks in that pregnancy, we found out he was breech baby. And I tried everything I could do that I knew of, and I resourced myself to try to get him to move, because I really wanted to have an unmedicated vaginal birth. That was important to me. And so we had done moxibustion and chiropractor work and
Spinning
baby. I went swimming. I remember going over to the Rainier Beach pool, and going swimming. It was like in the winter. I found out he was breech. I was like lying on stairs upside down,
Right. All the
acupuncture, all the inversions. Actually, it was at 30 weeks we found out that he was breech. At 37 weeks, I did the external version, and it didn't work. It wasn't painful for me. A lot of people warned me to be painful. That was sort of my first experience at the hospital with that pregnancy, over at Swedish Ballard. And I was just so determined to get him to move that I was like, I'm here, we're moving him, we're going to do a vaginal birth at a birth center. And he wouldn't move. So at 37 weeks, the doctor at Swedish Ballard said, well, this is sort of the end. Like, you need to schedule your C-section at this point. And I had talked to some people about doing a vaginal birth still, even with a breech baby. Someone I knew someone who had done it, but it sounded too scary to me for my first. The woman I spoke to had done it with a second pregnancy, and she had driven to Portland, and it just sounded really complicated. Rented an Airbnb in Oregon is how she did it. I don't know why, but I ended up just conceding and having a C-section that I originally didn't want. And so I really found a lot of grief in just that, not having the birth I wanted really brought me a lot of grief in that pregnancy. But I think it was 39 and 5. My husband picked our son's birthday, and we scheduled the C-section for 39 and 5. And the C-section, it's the first C-section in the morning. You're the first one on the docket. So I went in really early, got prepped. The C-section was supposed to be uneventful, which it was. I mean, it's a healthy baby, but the spinal block didn't work for me. And so I started feeling a lot of pain after my son was out, and they were doing repairs to my uterus, to the point where I actually started lifting off the table and moving my lower body, which I should be immobilized from the bra line down,
right,
with an effective spinal block. The anesthesiologist after the fact said it's most likely that I have a band of tissue that doesn't take anesthesia. And then that combined with I metabolize it quickly is that's what she suspected. Yeah, got really intense after he was out and during the repairs, when repairs were being made. And they ended up, the doctor was shouting to put me under, give me general anesthesia. My midwife was with me, and she was really advocating for me to be awake. I wanted to have skin to skin immediately. So I was screaming, no, and she was really advocating for me to stay awake. And so they ended up doing fentanyl in my IV and laughing gas through the mask, which felt really scary because I never had either of those drugs. And it got very intense for a few minutes, but it worked for pain management. So that was sort of the story of my son's birth. Oh, and then during the repairs, they saw that my uterus was arcuate. So it was sort of like heart-shaped. It just had like a small, it wasn't deviated, but it just sort of came down at the top, which they suspect inhibited his movement. So when we did the external version, he just couldn't quite get fully down in the right position. It prevented him from moving the whole time, probably from that 30-week time when we were trying all the things. So, after that birth, my midwife and my doctors were like, "You're a great candidate for a VBAC," and that's what we're really hoping for with our second. That was like my whole goal at the second is like, we're going to have a VBAC. We're going to have the birth I wanted. Probably now, in my mind, I couldn't have a home birth or a birth center birth, but I was really hoping for at least a vaginal birth.
And that was with your second pregnancy after your son?
That's what I was hoping for my second. But so 2.5 years later, we got pregnant. And we had both of our pregnancies were pretty unremarkable in terms of fertility. Like, when I wanted to get pregnant, tried the first time, we were just really fortunate. And, it's funny because I kind of come from this big family, and I never wanted 7 kids myself. But I always just kind of took that for granted. Like, I'm going to have no problem getting pregnant. I'm going to have no problem giving birth. Like, my body's made for this. My mom did this. And I had such a different, like, my mom had all unmedicated vaginal births, 2 at home. She had 1 child that was premature, but like really like unremarkable pregnancies and deliveries. And I just assumed that I would have that kind of same fertility journey as my mother. And fertility hadn't been an issue for the first 2 pregnancies. So for our second pregnancy, got pregnant right away. And at the first appointment, I went back to the hospital for the first appointment because I thought I'll probably have a hospital birth. I at least want to see the surgeon who, I had only met the day of my cesarean with my son. But I was like, let's go back to that same doctor for the first appointment at least before transition back to the midwife. And I believe I was around 10 or 11 weeks at that first appointment. I was a little later because it was like over Christmas, but they brought me in early January, and it was in 2017. And we did our first scan at that appointment, and I was sent from the scan radiology to the waiting room, and then brought in to meet my doctor. And she came in the room with the ultrasound and was just like, "I have to deliver some really difficult news." She's like, "I'm not a high risk OB, but what I think I'm seeing is something called placenta increta. It's an abnormal attachment of the placenta." And she's like, I can't be your doctor now. And she basically was like, maybe I'm misreading this, but I need you to go to a high risk OB at this point. And hopefully I'm misreading it, and you'll have you'll be back. Maybe you'll be back. My husband, like, receiving that news was really difficult. I think in the moment I just hadn't anticipated it at all. I was so like shocked. And when she told us this, she kind of went through all the options of what could happen. Because just as a person, I'm always like, I'm like a researcher. Katie and I are really similar like this. Like, we want data and information. And so
right.
I was like, okay, well, tell me everything. So I was sort of in shock. My husband was like, I think I'm going to barf. His response was really bodily, and I went really like just intellectual. In that moment, I just wanted to know all the information. And you think you have we were really thinking we have this normal pregnancy, and we had such an uneventful pregnancy with our son. We were like, oh, it's just going to go this way. We know exactly how this will go. So definitely not expecting that news. I always liken it to being on a freight train that's going 100 miles an hour and on one track, and all of a sudden you switch tracks, and it was very jarring. But she laid out in that first appointment, and she's like, I think I was what I'm saying. She was like, you could have to terminate the pregnancy. You could lose your uterus. You could, you will definitely lose your uterus, I think is what she told me. Like, even if you have a live birth, but you might have to terminate. And so I was just like in shock and reeling. I wanted to know all the information. I remember like a stupid thing. Like I was like, can we talk to a financial counselor to understand how I can even afford those? Like what's going to happen? Like your mind just is trying to make sense of something terrible.
Right.
Yeah. So that first appointment was just like brutal. And driving home from the appointment, I was trying to resource myself in like the 30-minute drive home and just really struggling to make sense of what was happening. So we went to the referral. We went to University of Washington Medical Center in Montlake, which is where the high risk OBs are in the Seattle area. And it was like, I think 2 days later, we got an appointment with them. And I was really hoping that it would just be, that wasn't the case. It was a misreading on the ultrasound, but they confirmed what she saw. But yeah, they confirmed that it was a placenta increta. So there's 3 levels of this under the placenta accreta umbrella, which is an abnormal attachment of the placenta in the pregnancy. Accreta is where it's attached to the endometrium of the uterus, and then increta is the myometrium. And percreta is when it's through the entire uterus. So the best way I can describe it is, again, there's those 3 levels of your uterus, the endometrium, the myometrium, and then there's the last layer is the serous membrane, which all of our organs are wrapped in. It's like this really, like, as I understand, like a transparent, it's explained to me like almost like a saran wrap that our organs are wrapped in. And so that would be that would be placenta percreta, where it actually goes through that membrane and starts invading other organs. Wherever it's attached in the uterus, it can just like invade other organs that are nearby. So it's like the placenta's villi is searching for nutrients. It's doing what it should be doing, but it's just attached abnormally. And most likely my attachment was caused by the C-section. We don't know that 100%, but because there was some scarring there. It's the only time anything had been in my uterus. I've never had a previous abortion or had fertility treatments prior. Those kind of things, like I never even had an IUD, like those kind of things can leave scarring, which can lead to placenta accreta or one of the accretas. So again, because I had never had anything in my uterus prior to a C-section, they assumed that scar tissue left something to attach for the placenta to attach abnormally. I'll never know 100%. But yeah, so at UW-NC, they confirmed that it was placenta increta. And I was only at like 11 or 12 weeks at that point. So I was really early on for it to be all the way through the myometrium, through the muscle layer of the uterus, which was really alarming, especially since the growth of the baby wasn't very big at this point. And they were like, for you to sustain a pregnancy to viability would be really difficult given how much damage is already done to your uterus, and you're at risk for a uterine rupture or invasion of other, like it's probably going to go through the serous, and it will invade other organs. And so your options, they gave me 3 options. 1, to do a hysterectomy and remove the baby and all the products of conception at the time, terminate the pregnancy and put methotrexate, which is a cancer drug, into my uterus to try to get the placenta to sort of retract and accelerate its demise, basically. They would stop the baby's heartbeat and then try to get the placenta to retract quickly. And then lastly was to try to continue the pregnancy, but they were like, you're so far from viability that we just think that would be incredibly dangerous. But, they gave me the 3 choices, which is an impossible thing to do. Like I had to make a decision with 3 impossible choices.
Right.
So we were sort of really following that appointment. But we went home, and it's also like you have a critical timeline here, because every day the pregnancy continues is like
Right.
growth. And they told me when I left the hospital, you can never be alone for like as long as this takes to resolve, because if you had an internal hemorrhage, you probably you're not safe with yourself, basically. Like, you would have to be able to identify the signs of an internal hemorrhage and call someone, because you'd be unconscious within seconds.
Wow.
So I was sort of like always with people too, but anyway, that was another frustrating part of it. But yeah, so that was how we left the hospital that day, and my husband and I talked about it and thought about it and cried about it, and it was an intense couple days. And we decided, and we talked to a lot of people. I found like the leading expert in the world on this specific diagnosis, who's based out of NYU. He's done the most research. I just advocated for myself and tried to like learn as much as I could. I got my PhD in like 4 days on this diagnosis.
Yeah.
And we came to the decision that we needed to protect my life. We had a 2-year-old at the time, my husband, and as much as I love the baby, like, it was important to preserve my health and well-being. And so we terminated the pregnancy. So we did the termination with a methotrexate, because they don't do a DNC in these instances, because again, they're just trying to do the most conservative treatment. They're like, your uterus is already compromised. If we go in and do a DNC and scrape around, we'll probably puncture it. So they terminate with an injection, and then they do that methotrexate through the same needle directly into your uterus. I stayed overnight to observe, and I asked at that time, like, please don't put me in labor and delivery units, like, on that floor. So they were like, we'll put you in oncology, since I had cancer medication in my uterus. One of the reasons we had chosen that route and not just a hysterectomy with the termination at the time was because we were still trying to preserve the possibility for future pregnancies, and hopefully retain my uterus so I could have future pregnancies. And they told me, like, it's very unlikely you'll ever have another pregnancy, even if you keep your uterus, because of how much it's damaged. But we were like, okay, we'll try it and let's see. So after the termination, they kept me one night for observation and oncology. Everything was normal, so they sent me home. And a month later, 2 weeks later, my body recognized I wasn't pregnant anymore. I started bleeding. And then I think a week into bleeding, I passed the fetus. I delivered her at work. I had returned to work at that time. And, we'll talk about this later, but so much of this journey is about intuition. And I remember at the time, I just had this really strong intuition to reach down. I honestly thought I was passing a clot when I delivered her. And before, I had always just been wiping when I had gone to the bathroom when I had something that was a clot, or I assumed was a clot. But this one, I actually reached in and I pulled her out. She was 12 weeks, so she was very small. And yeah, I took her home and I put her in a pad and just tucked her in my bra, and I went home early that day. And actually at that point I had called my doctor to know what the sex of the baby was, because I hadn't known prior to that, but they had done a cell-free DNA blood draw. And so I wanted to know, I wanted to have closure once I saw her. And so they shared that with me. And, we grieved. We were really, really heartbroken. But 2 days after that, I started showing signs of sepsis. So I think the day following, that night and the day following, I started having pretty high fevers and chills. And so I was sort of just trying to ignore it. But my body had gotten an infection, a pretty bad infection the uterus had from the retained products of conception. They were on necrotic tissue. And on Sunday, so I had delivered her on Friday at work, and then on Sunday, I started shaking violently my body was just trying to warm up from the chills I was having. But I started shaking violently, and I called the doctor, and she said, come to the ER immediately. And I went in. My heart rate was 130, 140. I don't remember. It was high for a resting heart rate. I had a really high fever, and they weren't really worried about sepsis. But they also weren't willing to do a D&C to remove the necrotic tissue. So they got me back into the oncology floor, and they decided on a conservative treatment of misoprostol to contract my uterus and hopefully push out the retained products of conception. And they had me on that starting at 6 a.m. to, I think it was like to 10 p.m. It was like all day. It was a half dosage of the misoprostol every 2 hours or 3 hours. And if you're not familiar with it, you put it under your tongue to sort of just absorb into your mucous membranes. And so after my second, they told me this is going to be like the worst cramping you've ever had in your life. Like, I had one dose, I didn't feel anything. I had the second dose, I didn't feel anything. Half an hour after I took the second dose, so it was at 9 a.m. And I started hemorrhaging. I was in bed, and I could feel myself bleeding a lot, but I didn't know. And looking back, I did so many things wrong, but I didn't know. And I was alone. My husband and my mom's actually a nurse, and my husband and my mom had left because the first dose was so unremarkable. They had left to go get some breakfast, and my mom was making phone calls, and I was alone with my cousin in the room. And, I was like, oh, let's go up to the toilet. Let's go to the bathroom so I can just bleed in the toilet, which was like, no, they want to collect the blood to see how much you've lost. It would be better if I just put the bed back to help gravity, keep the blood in my body. I should have just called the doctor through the bed. I did all these things wrong, but I went into the bathroom, and it was like a faucet. I couldn't stop bleeding. And within at least a minute, I had drained my body of more than half its blood, and I lost consciousness, and they couldn't get a heartbeat. We were desperately trying to get someone to come and help us, which put me a little bit at a disadvantage, being on oncology, because no one knew how to treat this person that was having a massive hemorrhage. But my nurse was on a break, so it was a little bit of a kerfuffle, but they called a code in the hospital, and I woke up in a room where the tone had really changed, and there were a lot of people in the room, and I was in my bed, and there was a crash cart, and there was a full room. My husband was pulled. He had come back in during the event, but when a code's called, they send a social worker, and they put a chair in the hallway for family members. And so he was really shaken because he was kind of watching some of the event play out. He was white as a ghost. And yeah, I woke up to a room that was just really altered from how I had felt before the event. I had felt so hopeful, and I was just really hoping to retain my uterus, and I was hopeful that we would just be discharged in a day, and then this happened. And it was actually on my mother's birthday, which is also Valentine's Day. At that point, they were I think they got some bigger gauges into my arms and put a lot more blood products in because they needed to get blood into me. They had me stabilized by doing a Foley catheter in my uterus to stop the bleeding. And they were we need to get you down to radiology because we need to scan and see what's happening. You've lost a lot of blood. And so they wheeled me down to radiology. My doctor was there and my radiologist, and they did the ultrasound. And that's when the doctor came back in and said, I know I've been trying to save your uterus this whole time, but this is the end of the road. You have to have a hysterectomy today. Sorry. And I went from being the patient that was super verbal and asked all the questions and wanted to know what else we could do, demanded to be cared for, to being this quiet. because I knew we were done. And I also knew the stakes were really high. And I think I scared my doctor that day because she was like, why isn't she talking anymore? But I was like, okay. I just went nonverbal. They wheeled me to the OR to prep for the surgery. And yeah, I had a hysterectomy. And I mean, in terms of the surgery, like, I think everything was pretty standard. I had a partial hysterectomy, so I kept my cervix and my ovaries. And then it was just like I think I was in the hospital for another 3 days or so in recovery, just getting my hematocrit back to normal so they could discharge me. And they went through the cesarean scar when they did the incision. So it was just getting that. I mean, I had a C-section before, so I was really familiar with the abdominal recovery. It felt pretty much the same as having a C-section. They want you to walk before you're discharged, etc. The main concern for me was just my iron count. My hematocrit was really low from losing so much blood, and so I just received a lot of blood products while I was in the hospital over those 3 days, and then it discharged me. And yeah, that was the events of 2017 that sort of led me to surrogacy. That was like my first 2 pregnancies. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah, that is. I'm trying to figure out what I should do right now because my human self wants to just cry with you. Um, and it's really hard, but my professional self is like, don't cry on your podcast.
It's okay. I'm over here quietly crying too.
Yeah, like, Krista, oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. That is really heavy, and I don't even have the words to like respond with anything that's worth talking about because that just needs to sit. That's really, really heavy, and that is quite a journey. And you are so strong. You are so brave for making all the decisions that you made. And I just want to hug you so hard. Katie, hug her for me, please.
You can hug her forever.
That's a journey. I am happy that you are here with us today and that you are breathing and here to be a mother still. I'm very, very happy for that. And I'm speechless now because I don't know what else to say, but thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's really remarkable that she still has hope. She's always had hope.
Yeah. And that took me a long time, I think, to recognize that I still had hope, because when the physical part, sort of like my body healed, I still had like a huge hole from all the emotional wounds that had been done in that experience. I just really I needed to heal from that. And I think if you had talked to me, I don't know how many years ago that was, 6 years ago, I would have said I didn't have hope. And I felt pretty hopeless. I can now see that actually the hope was always there. Other things were really loud, and so I couldn't see it. But I felt a lot of despair in that moment. And after, for like a long time, I really took a year to do all the important emotional healing following our loss. And then in 2018 is when we actually made our embryos, because we hadn't needed to do IVF prior to that. Like, we had these just natural conceptions with our 2. So a year after we had like done a lot of healing, and I still had a lot of grief, and I will always carry that with me, that grief. But we took time to heal, and then we did IVF in 2018, and we made 2 little embryos one of which is sleeping upstairs now. She's she's a fully formed being. Yeah. And we started to think about what else was possible. I think that was where we sort of, with a lot of the emotional healing, we were like, well, what else is possible? And how do we preserve the possibility of growing our family in this way that we wanted? And that sort of just like led us to IVF. And there were some surprises in that. I thought, I don't have any trouble. I'll have all these eggs. And I learned that I had a low ovarian reserve.
How old were you when you did IVF?
I was 37, I think. Yeah, 37, 38. It was only a year later.
Yeah.
But my doctor also said, our doctor, our IVF doctor, said that based on my personal medical history, he's like assuming that I had a pretty robust ovarian reserve before my loss, and that doing the hysterectomy, anytime you mess in that area, you can lose eggs, even though obviously I kept my ovaries, but any like sort of cauterizing, they had to do like a lot of work, moving things around, you can lose.
They're fragile eggs.
Follicles. So yeah, I had some more learnings about my body. It's funny, like I feel like in pregnancy, when I was pregnant with my son, I learned more about my body than I had known maybe ever. And then through my loss, through having a hysterectomy, I learned a lot more about my body. And then doing fertility treatments, it's been like quite an education. But it worked out, and like you just need one embryo. It turns out one good embryo. Yeah.
Yeah.
We also were very fortunate. I had to acknowledge that, because we'll get into that story, but just like so, everything worked out really well.
Yeah. Oh man. I'm excited to hear the other side, Katie. I would love to hear about your births with your two babies, and then what brought you and Krista together.
Yeah. Okay. So my first baby, Delphine, she was a surprise. So my now husband and I were dating, and found out I was pregnant on Christmas Day. I was like, I feel weird. And we were getting on an airplane the next morning super early. I was like, oh gosh, all the drugstores are closed on Christmas. I don't know. Anyway, we found a Walgreens that was open, took a pregnancy test, and it was very positive. And I was like, oh shit. What is happening here? So I didn't even think about my previous goals around birth. I was not in the space at that point to be like, oh, what do I want my birth to be like? I was like, oh my God, I need prenatal vitamins and an OB. Like that was that was the extent of my thought process at that point. So I got some prenatal vitamins and I found an OB. And I just kind of, went along with my pregnancy and did a lot of counseling with my now husband to make sure we were in a good place to welcome this baby to the world, which was so key. And then I loved my OB, and I had been planning this unmedicated hospital birth. And, I just took all the birthing classes I could get my hands on. I hired a doula. And then towards the end of my pregnancy, I was at I think it was my 35-ish week appointment, and I met with a different OB in the clinic. And, this is my first time meeting her. I felt really confident with my OB, but this was the first time meeting her, and she was head of the practice at the time. And I said, I'm planning this unmedicated vaginal birth. And she kind of gave me this answer that was like, or this response that was like, well, how do you think you're going to do that? Is basically how I don't even remember the words that she used, but that's how she made me feel. And I said, oh, well, I'm taking all these birthing classes and I hired a doula. And she's like, I mean, I don't know if that works. It was just this doubt that she had in my ability to birth my baby. And I didn't like it. And I left that appointment. I remember standing outside of the clinic, hugging my now husband, Dan, and just crying. I said, she doesn't think I can do it. Now I'm going to cry. And that was the first time I had any doubt. Like, I don't know. I was just on this road of like, yeah, I can do this. I'm great at a lot of things. And I know my body really well. And of course I can do this. And she just didn't believe me. And I said, like, what if she's the one on call and she just wants to like throw me into surgery? That's how it felt. And that was, I know, a big hormonal, probably over emotional response, but I'm glad I had that response. So I talked to my doula at the time, and she encouraged a really great homework project for Dan and I. She said, why don't you and Dan make a pro and con list of home birth, birthing center, and hospital, and just kind of see where that takes you. And so we did. And Dan, my husband, who is like very analytical, fairly risk adverse, he's in tech. He looked at me and he said, why aren't we having our baby at home? I was like, wait, what? This was like an option that was never even in my mind as something that I thought he would go for. It was something that my friends reminded me all along that I had always said, like, oh, I'm going to have this like amazing orgasmic home birth. But then I got pregnant and it was a surprise and I wasn't planning on it. And then I went to the hospital, found my OB, and like just went on that path. And so when Dan said to me, why aren't we having a home birth? It like clicked for me. Oh shit, I always wanted a home birth. Why aren't we having a home birth? So, by 36 weeks, I set up some appointments to hire or to interview midwives. And the biggest question was, how safe is it really, right? And at that point, a big study had come out. It had just come out, and it really compiled the evidence around the safety of home birth and it being as safe, if not safer, than a low-risk hospital birth. So that was what we needed to hear, or what he needed to hear. His biggest worry was about our carpet. we had just
big
bought
one
a new
for partners. Yeah,
I know, we had just bought a new house, and he was like, "But what about the carpet?" I'm like, "It's gonna be fine," and it was fine. So anyway, at 36 weeks, I switched over to midwives and continued my pregnancy with them. And then I spontaneously went into labor at 39 weeks and 3 days. I was getting a prenatal massage. My water broke during the massage. And the funniest thing is that I when you're having a prenatal massage, you're typically on your side. And I was on my side. I flipped over to the other side and I felt a little pop. But I was like, well, if this is my last massage, I'm going to finish it. So I didn't say it. I didn't say anything. I just finished the massage. And I wasn't sure because this was my first time going through this. And so after the massage, my massage therapist, who's also a naturopathic doctor, she left the room and she met me in the hallway and she said, okay, I scheduled you for Monday just in case you're still pregnant. And I was like, oh no, my water just broke. She's like, what? Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So anyway, I went home and long story short, my midwife checked on me. I was already like 3 centimeters dilated prior to that day. And then things just escalated pretty quickly. I think by 3 p.m. my contractions started on their own. And then I labored in many different ways all around my house. And she was born after 4 hours of pushing. So my active labor and transition was really short, and I pushed her for a long, long time. And she was born at 10 p.m. So about 3 hours of active labor before I started pushing. And she was OP, so she was just kind of a little stuck. Mm-hmm. And she had a nuchal hand. So
those nuchal hands.
Those nuchal hands. She came out with her hand on her head. So anyway, all of that was amazing. And yeah, it was just this really cool experience. So when I was on maternity leave, I was working for a big tech company at the time. And I was on maternity leave for 5 or 6 months. And I just decided, while I'm bored, I'm going to take a doula workshop because we're at this age where our friends are having babies and I want to have more tools in my toolbox so I can support and help them. Not that I necessarily wanted to become a doula, but I just like went through that amazing experience and thought, wow, like, holy shit, that was cool. So how can I be more helpful? And I did a doula workshop through Best Year, and towards the end of my maternity leave, literally like the week before my leave, I was like, how can I go back and sit in an office every day and look at a computer when like people are giving birth out there?
Yes.
And I can help them. And my partner is, as you will learn, very supportive of my wild decisions. And he said, if you want to quit your job and we weren't married at the time, right? So he was like, if you want to quit your job and explore this, then do it. And I did. So anyway, I became a doula and supported quite a few really beautiful, awesome births. And then 4 years later, 3.5 years later, we decided to start trying for another and got pregnant right away and had the same like really easy-ish pregnancy, other than like my back was not a big fan of the way I was carrying him, but it was uneventful and that it was a really healthy pregnancy. This time it was, with midwives and another planned home birth. And I went into labor spontaneously at 39 weeks and 1 day, and gave birth to him in my bedroom again, this time in the birthing tub. Last time it was on land. And that was also another very quick labor. I think it was about 3 hours, 2.5 hours. My MO is that I tend to have very long early labors, like weeks long of early labors, where I'm just contracting nonstop around the clock all the time. And so when I go into labor, I'm pretty in denial about it because I'm like, it's fine. It's going to calm back down. So by the time I'm in it, I am very in it. So anyway, that birth was epic, and it just is life-changing. It really is life-altering. I'm just so blessed that I've had really straightforward births. And then I knew my family was done. I had no desire to have another baby of my own. I love babies. I love sleep too. So taking care of newborns is like just, it's really hard. It's a hard phase. And so I knew that 2 was great for our family. But I couldn't grapple with the idea that that was my last time giving birth. Like, I love birth. I don't love being pregnant. I love giving birth. So anyway, do you want to talk about how surrogacy kind of popped into the picture?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so, I knew my family was complete, but I just couldn't really figure out this pull to give birth again. And I equate it to running a marathon. Not that I've ever run a marathon. 10K is the most I've done. But regardless, marathons you train for, clearly, and you don't necessarily love getting up every morning and doing your 17-mile run to train for your marathon. But the marathon itself, this big event, all the like excitement around that day, and then you're running it and you're exhausted and there's people cheering you on the sidelines and you get closer and closer and closer and you get that like last little wind to like get across the finish line. Like that is what birth is to me. And then you do it and you're like, oh my God, thank you, body. I am so amazing. Like that felt so powerful. Right. And so to me, it's like, I don't like the training, which is the pregnancy. I like the event. I like the event, and then I like the gold medal at the end. So, surrogacy had been on my mind because I have friends that don't have uteruses, and I always thought like, oh, if they want to have babies, I would carry for them. One of my best friends is gay, and I just thought like I always said that if you want to have kids, I will grow your babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had never really thought about caring for a heterosexual couple. It never even occurred to me.
Mm.
And not because I was trying to exclude that. It just wasn't like in my mind, like, oh yeah, there are heterosexual couples out there without uteruses or with, you know, really big fertility stories that can't have babies. It just was, I'll always carry for gay men. That was just my kind of plan. So anyway, I got to a point where I could tell that, you know, hormonally my body was like, okay, let's do this and then let's be done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost 40 and I knew that I wanted to kind of close this chapter of birthing before I turned 40 or around. I don't know, just kind of an arbitrary number, but I just felt like, you know, I was ready to kind of close up shop, but wanted to check this off my bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had, during the pandemic, 2020, I had joined a couple of informational groups on Facebook about surrogacy, just to kind of wrap my mind around what that meant and what the process was like. And one of them was a local Washington State group. And I posted a few questions and, you know, really questions that I had no idea. It was very early in my research phase. And it was like, can I have a home birth? How do I get matched with people? Like, you know, questions like that. And I got some really great responses. One of them was Krista. And I didn't, you know, they were all helpful responses, but this was just something that was, you know, I was kind of noodling around in my head for a long time. So yeah, I posted those questions and that was the end of my question seeking in that group. And then like, I don't know, a couple months later,
A few weeks, I think.
Weeks later, yeah, Krista found me on Instagram. She was like, who is this Katie Domingue person?
That is my own research.
Who is this person? And I think what you had said was one of, you know, the Facebook algorithm, like people are more likely to see your post if you post a picture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I posted a picture from the time, and it was like right before the election, and it was a picture of my daughter wearing a necklace that said vote.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think you could see her face. It was just like a little girl wearing a necklace that said vote. And I think that spoke to Krista. It did. So she was like, who is this person in Washington State asking these questions about surrogacy?
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear Katie finding those same groups that I was in.
Yeah.
So in 2018, I already spoke about doing IVF and an egg retrieval and making the embryos. But as part of my recovery in 2017, 2018, 2019, I was really searching to see again what else was possible. Like, how could we pursue this idea of growing our family? And, you know, we looked into adoption, we had looked at surrogacy, and there were some complications with surrogacy in 2017, 2018 when I was first learning about it, because compensated surrogacy wasn't actually legal in Washington State at the time. It could be a compassionate or altruistic surrogacy, which just means like usually a friend or a family member, but you couldn't do a compensated journey at that time. And so I think that's why I had joined the Washington State one, to understand, like, how are people doing this? Like, how are people doing surrogacy in Washington State? I had joined this surrogacy support group for Facebook. And I joined, like, a bunch of this. That's one of the things that Facebook has actually been great for, at least with my loss, was, like, hysterectomy because of complications of childbirth support groups. And so all these different support groups, and one of them was a surrogacy one. And I had just been pretty inactive on it, honestly. In 2020, like I had been sort of asking a couple questions at the very beginning, but I hadn't really used it that much. But I still saw questions come in. And Katie posted the post about asking some questions, and there was just something. I love that picture. You know, it was an intense time in 2020 in general, in the whole year. Not that I have to explain that on the podcast, but the election was really intense, and I liked that image, and I wanted to know more about Katie, and so I looked into her Instagram and learned more, and there was just something.
She stalked me. Let's be real. She stalked me.
A little online stalking. And I wanted to know more about her even more. So, and I felt really compelled to reach out to her, which was sort of a surprise to me because I wasn't looking to any of those sites I had joined to find a surrogate. I was really just trying to find information. And even in connecting with Cadie, I don't know, I suppose I thought there was a possibility, but I don't think I even really made an ask in the first connection we had.
I don't think you made an ask, but I think you put it out on the table.
Yeah.
It was like, if this is something that you're considering, like, maybe let's
chat.
connect. Yeah.
How did you feel when she did that, Katie? Were you like, oh crap, like I just had questions, but now there's a family that might want?
So honestly, at that point in time, I still thought if I did it that I would be caring for my friends. So I responded. I responded saying like, thank you for sharing your story with me. She gave me a very abbreviated, version of her story. And, like I am researching and like, let's just see where this goes. And so we did. We just
kept in touch.
Basically. Yeah, and it was just, I started following her, so we were liking each other's posts, and like we had a lot of random friends in common, and so yeah, over the next year and a half, really, it was just kind of observing each other from afar,
each other's lives, and values.
Yeah,
I think that was what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That was it.
We just sort of got to know each other, never meeting in person, but just through.
No, and not even having more chats about it, really. Like once every 6 months, we might check in, and I think I updated you saying like, "Hey, I don't know where you're at, but here's where I'm at, and I'm not ready." So I just didn't want to like think that they had put all their eggs in my basket, kind of thing. Not that a random person on Instagram would have done that, but I just was, wanting to be respectful of their journey as well. So,
and we had at the same time. So I reached out to Katie based on this like feeling that I wanted to know more about her, or I wanted to be in her life in some way. And at the same time, we had kind of started. I wasn't waiting. Katie had checked in with me really graciously, but we had started trying to buy a house in Seattle, which was its own thing in 2021. And then we were also doing agency interviews. So a lot of people that do surrogacy go through an agency. An agency is usually like take care of the matching. So like meeting a surrogate, making sure you're compatible, matching. It's almost like online dating. I haven't gone through a whole matching process, but that's what I understand, like looking at profiles, interviewing people. And then they also facilitate like the pregnancy and appointments and communication. I think it can be as hands-on or hands-off as sort of you want. But it is managed by a third party, basically. That's what an agency does. Mm-hmm. And so my husband and I started just knowing that we still felt this pull to grow our family. We started doing agency interviews in 2021. I think we were like knee deep in them when you reached out just to give like a quick update, like still not ready.
Yeah.
Katie was on her own like health journey, and there's still a lot going on. I feel like in 2021 in terms of like homeschooling kids and so that's sort of like my husband and I, we actually signed with an agency in fall of 2021. We decided on the agency in Idaho. A lot of the reason was because they were female owned. It's difficult thinking about monetizing a person's uterus for surrogacy. And so like, what are my ethical obligations? I thought a lot about that. When I was interviewing agencies, I wanted to learn about all of it and like what their sort of values were, why they did it. I really liked this one in Idaho. It was closer to us because we were living in Seattle, we were living in Washington State, and just driving to Idaho felt like a lot easier than driving to like Minneapolis for birth. And then they were female owned, and specifically they were surrogate owned. So the people that were working, a lot of the people that worked at the agency and also the owner had previously been the surrogate, I believe, on multiple journeys. And that just felt like, someone's passionate about it, and not someone just trying to make money off of this. It's not just a business.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had chosen them. We had built a profile. We had sort of just there's been a big demand for surrogates, especially since the pandemic. And then there's also been a lot of, I feel like the pandemic sort of has also this effect of an attrition of surrogates, because a lot of surrogates are, and not to generalize them, but from my understanding, a lot of surrogates are like stay-at-home moms, and it's just been hard for them it's a demanding role, as Katie will talk about, and it was hard for people to get to appointments and do all the when they were doing all the childcare during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
There was this demand on them at home, and then to do surrogacy was also just another external demand, and so there was sort of this attrition of surrogates during that time. So the wait times were just like had really skyrocketed. So we had been waiting, I think, for like 4 months through the fall of 2021 and the spring of winter of 2022. And then I got an email or a message from you on Instagram in March of 2022.
Yeah. So what had kind of transpired between that initial time of asking questions in Facebook groups and then actually like being ready was that I did go on my own little health journey. I got super fit and strong and went to see my naturopath and made sure my hormone levels were kind of, balancing out. I had started taking an antidepressant. I was having some like anxiety and some depression during the pandemic, which I think many people experienced, unfortunately.
Yeah. I was going to say, who wasn't?
Who wasn't? Yeah. So medication really helped me with that. And one of the requirements for surrogacy is that you are off any sort of antidepressants or mood meds for 6 to 12 months prior to starting a journey. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't coming off of meds just so that I could do it. I wanted to make sure I was in a good place. So anyway, that kind of took me a while to get into a really great place where I felt like, okay, I'm ready. And meanwhile, I, had some friends that I thought I might carry for, and I realized they weren't ready, and I was. So when it came to my husband, our conversations had always been about me potentially carrying a baby for people we knew. And he was supportive of that. And when it came to carrying a baby for strangers, that was like much more of a reach for him to be like, wait, so you want to risk your life for other people? Okay. So I wasn't going to do it unless he was 100% on board. And so we had a little getaway for his birthday in March of 22. And he claims I got him drunk and made him agree to it, but whatever. We were at a bar and I brought up the topic and I said, hey, this is something I think about every day. It got to the point where it was really every day I was thinking about this. And I said, I need to either, walk through that door with you, or I need to close it and like lock it, and it needs to be done. And I was okay either way. I was okay either way. I just needed to know. And his response was what it has been through this whole, this whole thing. Let's have a home birth. Let's have a baby for someone else. So he said, if that's what you want to do, I won't stop you and I will support you. And I was like, what? And I just remember sitting in this bar, like sitting at the bar, which is really fun for parents who don't get to go out and sit at a bar very often. Sitting at the bar, just crying, drinking my cocktail and crying like, oh my God. Okay. And I think it was literally that night, maybe the next morning. I think it was that night. I went home and I messaged Krista and I said, I'm ready. I don't know where you're at in this journey because it'd been a while since we had checked in, but I'm ready. So if you want to like talk about what that means or like meet, let's do it. And so we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was running out the door. When I got the message, I was like running out the door to like throw our son, who was turning 8, his birthday party. I was running out the door to prep for his birthday party, and I saw this message from Katie, and I was like, oh my God. I told my husband, and we were like, oh my God. But after the birthday party was over, I like reached back out to her, and we were like, let's get together I think the following weekend.
It's so funny. It's so funny because like I remember sending that message, and on Instagram you can tell when somebody's read it, like seen. And I'm like, she saw it and she hasn't responded.
Really?
Oh yeah. I was like, what is she thinking? What's going on? Because at that point it was like I had so much adrenaline around this. Like, he said yes, he said I could do it. Like, let's do it. And then I saw you read it and I was like,
Not responded.
like I don't even know
Hours
if I
pass.
slept, but I don't know what was going on, but I just remember.
Oh, so much is probably going through your head. You're like, oh my God, what does she think? It's like, where is she at in this journey? Like, oh, am I
Totally.
too late? Like everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think you knew that we had already signed with an agency or anything. You just
I
knew
did. I did.
You did.
I think I did know. I think I had checked in like June of the previous. No, I didn't know.
Yeah, you checked in, but we were interviewing. We were.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's funny that you were stressed out that we weren't responding sooner. I probably was stressed out because I was like, I have to have a moment where I can actually respond well. Yeah, but we acted on it pretty fast. Once I responded, you were like, let's see each other next weekend.
Yeah, because for me it was like, okay, if we're gonna do this, let's do it now. I didn't want to wait, and of course I didn't know Krista and her family either. So it was like, I think they're really cool based on this little slice of their life I get from social media, but we all know how that works, right?
Right.
So yeah, we decided to meet just the two of us and bring in the rest of our families if we felt like a good connection. And I was pretty adamant from the get-go that I didn't want to go through an agency. In the surrogacy world, a lot of people say that, an agency is really beneficial for a gestational carrier. A gestational carrier is what you call a surrogate if it's not their egg. So there's different types of carriers. There's the traditional surrogate, which would mean it would be the surrogate's egg, which is very uncommon, but it still happens. And then a gestational carrier means like I am the carrier of somebody else's baby that's genetically not mine, and I'm just carrying them. So we use the term surrogate in like a broader sense, and it's more recognizable to people, but gestational carrier is what I was in the surrogate world.
Yeah, and what my husband and I were intended parents.
Yeah.
So IPs, intended parents, just people that intend to become parents. And, for us, we used my egg and his sperm, but some people might use donor embryos, donor egg, donor sperm, all different.
And they're still called intended parents because they have an intention to become parents.
Right.
So little sidebar, but so we ended up getting together for brunch because we live about less than 10 minutes away from each other, which is also just so cool. So yeah, we had brunch and we cried and we laughed and Krista drank a lot of coffee.
I was going to say that. I think we spent 2 hours together at brunch, and then we moved down the street to Starbucks where we spent another hour together. There were tears. There was a lot of coffee consumed by me because I was nervous. I mean, it was a lot meeting this person that...
I drank a cocktail and I was like, oh God, is she going to judge me because I'm having a brunch cocktail? She didn't.
I didn't.
No.
I had a cocktail as well.
Yeah. You did.
And coffee.
You did.
I mean, the stakes for me felt really high, and I was like, I was really nervous. It's like a first date, sort of. I don't know if you felt really nervous. It didn't really help me that I drank a lot of coffee because it probably made me more nervous, but...
Probably did. Okay. So I sidetracked about the agency thing. So I was pretty adamant I wanted to do an independent journey because I just felt like people who are seeking out surrogacy typically are people who would rather have a baby on their own. And for whatever reason, they can't. And the amount of money and sometimes trauma and loss that can go into making the decision to seek a surrogate is just astounding. And to say, oh, spend more money on a third party that's going to make money off of your infertility and make money off of my ability to carry a baby just felt weird to me. And as a gestational carrier, a lot of people will say like, oh, you should go through an agency your first time. They'll like guide you through the process. It's best to go with an agency. And I just felt like I'm really capable of figuring this stuff out myself and asking the questions. And, we both have really good intuition, but I always knew that about myself. I have good connections in our city when it comes to, attorneys and whatnot, to make a baby legally in Washington State. So I just felt like, why would I want them to spend more money on an agency? It didn't cost me anything. It would have costed them quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was just pretty anti-agency because of the financial piece, which is great.
Yeah. And I never thought that we could do it without an agency, just because I didn't ever want to find a surrogate on my own, because it just felt like too raw, going through a loss like that. And then I felt like everything, the stakes were just too high, like to try to find a surrogate on my own and then have that person say no, or have someone like back out. Like, there's a protection that an agency affords you.
Yeah, because ideally they've like pre-screened people. They've gone through a medical and a psych clearance before they've, shown up on your screen as a potential match. And so there's a little bit of a safety net.
That. Like, I, as a person, am always someone who wants connection with people. And so I wanted the relationship, but I think I was too fearful of trying to find my own surrogate. And so that's sort of how I had always thought of it. Like, I'm never going to pursue finding a surrogate. You had sort of this had popped up, and I followed this intuition.
Mm-hmm.
But I had never done it before. I never pursued that. I never thought that that's something we could do or would do. But once Katie and I met, I knew, like, we've matched. This feels so good. Like, the only reason at that point that I thought we would go through an agency, because that was something you wanted. And so when we discussed agencies, I was like, now that this meeting has happened, let's try to do it independent. But whatever, I was deferring to you. Like, if you want to do an agency, if you want that sort of security of an agency, I'm happy to bring that on, but I don't feel like we need it. And, part of meeting Katie and spending 3 hours with her the first meeting, but also just knowing you over this time as a relationship's grown, is like, Katie is so, like, has such a strong, like, her own kind of sense of self in the world and motivation. And she is, I just never met, she's just really powerful, like, I very infrequently have I met people that have such a sense of power in themselves. And that really, like, surprised me, because I don't know, like, just observing you over social media, I don't know, and then meeting you in person, I was like, it kind of took my breath away, because it's just stunning, like, her sense of, like, how she shows up in the world, how she is in the world, and then getting to know her through this journey. And, like, she was, like, really pulling me along. I always identified this, after my loss, after losing my uterus, I identified that some sort of, like, shame in that. And also, like, if anyone did this, they would do it because they felt sorry for me. They pitied me. I'm the person lacking. And Katie came to me as someone who really wanted to do this. This is what truly surprised me. She wanted to do this so badly that she, like, pulled me along with her almost. Her energy, I kind of just got pulled into her orbit. I wasn't having to pull her along. We were really doing it together, too. We walked alongside and we supported each other through it.
Yeah.
And the idea of a marathon, we were like each other's pace runners.
Yeah, it's funny.
Neither of us have run a marathon.
No, you've not done that.
Very inexperienced here, but
it's funny. I mean, I totally agree with that. And there were multiple times where I had to check myself and check in with you and say, like, okay, but I know I'm ready to do this, but, like, are you ready? Or, like, I just found myself going, and then being like, oh, Katie, hold on. You might want to put your brakes on, because they might not be at the same pace you are.
I love it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was like, it was so delightful. It was such a, like, important part of who Katie is, to, like, be able to witness that, and getting to know you. It's like a core part of you. I remember there was one point where we were, I think, just talking, you were interviewing an attorney, maybe. You had to have reproductive attorneys in order to, like, just for documenting, and there's a contract and all kinds of stuff in a surrogacy journey, which we'll get into. But I remember we were, like, in the early stages. We had, like, matched. We had decided we wanted to do this. And we met for coffee, and you're like, am I going too fast? Should I slow down? Do you need more time to process? And I was like, I mean, yes, I do need more time to process, but I think that's just like what I have to do for the rest of my life now. So as delaying this for like 2 weeks or 2 months, I'm going to need like decades to process what's happening. And let's just keep going. I can do that concurrently.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And we all did. So,
Yeah.
so we had that initial meeting, and it was like clear that Krista and I, wherever this went, we were going to be in each other's lives. And then we decided to get our families together.
Mhm.
So Krista invited us all over for dinner
The next week.
Yeah, this moved really fast. Yeah, so my husband and kids, we all showed up and had dinner together. And, the kids played, and we talked about the hard things. Like, there's never a time that we haven't just put it all out there.
Yeah.
And I think my husband asked some really good questions. I don't know. Do you, what
Yeah.
do you remember from that?
Oh, I think your husband asked great questions. It's sort of this like weird, awkward thing. Like as soon as we walk, everyone knows why they're there, but none of us had ever done this before. And so I was sort of like, let's pour some wine, let's eat our dinner. The kids add sort of a level of chaos to the dinner where you're managing that. And I wasn't sure if we were actually going to talk about surrogacy or we were just going to like meet each other. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how this was going to run out. I didn't have any expectations necessarily. But at the end, after the kids had sort of left the table, I feel like Dan brought up, what was a couple things? About age? Is that right?
Probably.
But I just remember like he said, and this actually made me feel like so certain too, because like I knew that Katie, if she was going to do this, she would need the support of her partner. That I couldn't act as her partner entirely in this pregnancy, even though she would be carrying our baby. Mm-hmm. I wanted to support her. I knew that would be always really important, but I wasn't going to be with her all the time. And so Dan just reaffirmed that in a really beautiful way by just saying, and this was kind of awkward at first. I remember I think this is how it first got brought up at the end of dinner. He said, hey, so this is a surrogacy thing. I wouldn't choose this for Katie. Mm-hmm. Like if it was me, I don't want Katie to do this, basically. He's like, anything that puts her life and health at risk, which, and I knew that very well, how that pregnancies can do that. I don't want her to risk any of that for someone else, but I love her and I want to see her fulfill everything that she wants to do in her life. And I want to see her fulfilled. And it was, I don't know, that was just like, that just for me meant that Katie would always have that support at home through the whole pregnancy. Mm-hmm. He was just like affirming his love and commitment to Katie, and him saying yes, this journey was just that.
Yeah, so at the end of that dinner, I was like, all right, we doing this? Yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah, I remember leaving and you were like, one of the last things you said to me, well, first of all, Dan, who came in really awkward, said at the very end of dinner, like, can I be the uncle to this baby? and I love you guys so much. I was like, we spent 5 hours together, and this man's like, I love you too. And then also, Katie, I think you said at the end, like, I feel like I've always known you.
Mm.
Yeah. So
yeah,
we left that dinner like, I felt very confident. It was like, okay, what are the next steps? And it's a long process. It's a very long process. And ours was short in comparison to most, but it's a lot of waiting on the clinic. So I had to go through a whole like medical clearance, psych clearance, and that involves like, running blood tests, putting a camera in my uterus and looking at it, which was really cool. As a birth nerd, I'm like, ooh, is that my cervix? Oh, show me. Yeah. And so submitting all my medical records and previous pregnancy records to be reviewed by, doctors at the fertility clinic. And every step you're like, what if they see something they didn't like? What if, I got tattoos, I have sleeve of tattoos. What if they are not happy that I have tattoos within the last year? It's just like every single thing is a what if disqualifier. Mm. So there's a lot of anxiety in every one of those steps. And thankfully, we just kept getting a pass.
Yeah.
We just kept passing them and pushing forward. And so, yeah, it was a summer of a lot of waiting.
Yes.
And then we, did our legal contracts. We set up escrow. So as a surrogate, like I didn't pay for any of the medical bills. That's all Krista and Crispin that pay for that. And it comes, I pay for it out of a fund that they set up that I access. And then it kind of trickled down to transfer day. So we jumped through all the hoops, and October 4th was our transfer day. So prior to that, I had started taking medications to get my body ready, and my body responded really well. And that was kind of weird for me because that was the first time I had been on any sort of hormonal meds other than, birth control. And Krista came over and gave me my first progesterone injection. my husband does not do needles. And she was like, I'll do it. I'm coming over. So she gave me the first one. But it was just really a lot of teamwork, I think, the whole time. And I wanted that to be the case. I'm so grateful that we are, geographically so close, but also like friend-wise so close, because it was really a shared journey as the most I think it could be for you not carrying your own baby.
Right.
I mean, I think we really tried to do everything we could to share that experience with each other.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was able to attend every appointment. I think I missed one towards the end. Yeah, everything I could to just support you through this awesome gift you were giving us.
Yeah. I mean, I did injections for 12 weeks, and it was even like, if we were just hanging out or having dinner, she's like, can I give you your shot? I'm like, sure. Sure, of course you can. And you came, every ultrasound, everything. So anyway, one of the things that I was pretty adamant about was having another home birth. Mm-hmm. And, it can be really hard for people who have gone through a lot of medical trauma or fertility trauma to say yes to having a baby out of a hospital. Mm-hmm. And that's something that really stood out for me with Krista and Crispin the whole time. Is I said, I really just don't want to have a baby in the hospital unless I need to, because I feel safe at home. And they, from the get-go, there wasn't a question about that. They were really supportive and said, okay, great, let's do it. Which just kind of blows my mind after, everything they went through. But I think, and I'm sure Krista can speak to this a little bit better, but I think that for them, the hospital was a place that they experienced a lot of trauma. So being in a home setting provided a safety that wasn't associated with that, which, worked out for all of us in a really beautiful way.
Yeah, I think that is truly amazing. And, referring back to when Krista was telling the beginning of her story, when she did fall pregnant with her son, was that was kind of her hope, was to have a home birth with her son. Mm-hmm. And so I know Krista's upstairs with baby right now, but I'd be curious when she comes back down to ask her how she felt when you had announced to them that was your desire, because getting to, I wonder if it feels like it kind of came full circle.
Yes, absolutely. And it was something that, because that is what I wanted with my son, that it felt like, oh, we're doing this. We're just doing it. We're doing it with you. I wanted this home birth, this birth center birth with Calder. And I had a lot of grief. So it was actually really healing to then do it with our daughter and you, have a home birth.
Yeah, it was
all full circle.
It was pretty funny at the fertility clinic because so we do the transfer, and then it was so cute because normally you have like a week wait, a 9-day wait until your first beta test, which we did. But my husband was going out of town that week. And so I was like, do you guys want to do an at-home pregnancy test before he leaves so that we can all find out together? And knowing it was day 4.5 or 5, and that if there was any line, it would be like the faintest little line. So they came over and I peed on a couple tests and we like hid them and then set the timer and then dumped them out of the box and we all looked at them together and it was like, it's there. Oh my gosh, it's there. So we just all like had this moment of like, it worked. And all the kids were there. They were so excited. We took this picture. We're all like jumping for joy in my front yard. Like it was just so cool. And then every step along the way, you know, the betas came back with really solid numbers. And then our next beta came back with like really great numbers again. And then there's the ultrasound and like everything was just good.
Yeah.
Everything was good. And everything was straightforward. There wasn't a question. I'm so thankful of that.
So reassuring. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also just like, you know, when I met Katie and going through this process with her, which is one of the reasons I was so enthusiastic about a home birth too, is like, I had so much trust in you. Like, I felt like, I don't know, Katie is a trustworthy person, but also like her background, her body is like, you also trust your body. Like, you're not questioning a lot. Like, so I just felt it was just such an easy process in that way, like professionally what she does for work. It was cool. And I couldn't have asked for like a better, more qualified surrogate too.
Thanks.
Girl.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because I do trust my body. I do, you know, follow my intuition. This pregnancy was the most anxiety-inducing pregnancy I've ever experienced because there's so much more on the line, right? And so I did question if it's working. Am I doing it right? Should I not? Like there's a lot more what ifs during this pregnancy than I had ever experienced before because it wasn't about me and my family. It was about me and my family and your family, which is just a whole different ballgame. So yeah, we like passed through the fertility clinic with flying colors and they're like, where are you doing? Like, where should we transfer your medical care? And we're like, to midwives, we're having a home birth. And they're like, well, we don't recommend that. Numerous times we heard like, that's not recommended, but we fooled them.
We're doing it anyway.
Yeah, we're doing it anyway. So yeah, we did.
Isn't that just so hard to hear, like from providers, like how they're just like, even just outside of surrogacy, a lot of in-hospital providers are really hesitant with out-of-hospital birth. And I feel like if your relationship with each other wasn't as strong as it already was at that point in time, they could have caused doubt between you guys. You know, they could have made it so intense. And for them to feel like, oh, because I'm a medical provider, let me give you my opinion. Like, you were just like, hey, this is what we've already decided. Let's go ahead and do this. And they're like, really? Are you sure? Like, I feel like that's whack. But at the same time, I understand because there's a lot involved. But at the same time, I'm like, they're already going through a lot. Let them make their decisions and do their things, you know? That's just my side. But
yeah,
I'm
no,
not a surrogate or an IP.
You're so right, though, because for a lot of, I'll call them my surrogate sisters, other surrogates out there who are in my network because they transferred around the same time I did. This was a similar story because they, you know, experienced really typical physiological vaginal births. And then they are like, I love giving birth. We'll do surrogacy. And surrogacy became a whole different thing for them because they were treated as super high risk and, you know, taken care of by maternal and fetal medicine and having to do non-stress tests twice a week and a million ultrasounds and like this hands-off experience that they were used to having that led them down this path was not what they got because of IVF through a fertility clinic and then treated as high risk. And I know surrogates who had to mourn that because they went into it not knowing. And had that happened to me, I would have mourned that too. And I would have had grief around it, but it didn't happen, thankfully. So yeah, we transferred to the midwives, Jen and Mercedes. They were both at my son's birth and they're just the best ever.
I can agree 100%.
We love them. And Ceci, their amazing student who's now a midwife in their practice. And we were just like so well taken care of the whole time. And they, you know, spoke to us about risks with IVF and what those risks could be and what things that we might want to monitor a little closer or things that they weren't as concerned about. And so I felt like we had some really good conversations around that.
Yeah, and we kind of learned this together because they had never done a surrogacy pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we had never done one.
Yeah, they had done a lot of IVF pregnancies, but not surrogacy pregnancies. So yeah, we were all in it together, which was kind of fun. There was one appointment towards the end when we were talking about the actual birth, and was it Jen and Ceci got like down on the floor and they like acted out like the, you know, okay, if she's in this position, you want to catch the baby, and we go through like they were, you know, what if the cord is short, and here's how this might look, and it was just so funny at the time, and so like I'm so glad we did that. Accurate, yeah.
Oh, I think that's so awesome that they did that for you, because that action of them acting it out for you was helpful from the sounds of it. And it also just showed how much they, as providers, are so open to you knowing all the information so you can make an informed decision.
Yes. And it was so much out of care and respect for our vision of birth, right? Like we had a vision that we shared with them, and they said, okay, let's talk about how to make this as close to your vision as possible. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, every step of the way, it was out of respect for making sure I was safe, baby was safe, and we like got this birth experience that we all wanted.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that made it, I don't know, for me, I felt supported in the whole pregnancy thing with them, the pregnancy appointments. It was obviously Katie was a pregnant person, and Katie was the billable client, patient, but I felt really cared for as well. Like there wasn't a single appointment that the provider, either Jen or Mercedes or Ceci, didn't ask like, how are you doing? Like, how's your experience? Just caring for my like emotional, mental, spiritual health. I remember like early on, Jen came to our house in an appointment, and we kind of had like a therapy session.
Yeah, it was therapy. I think at one point they checked my blood pressure, but the rest of it was therapy.
Yeah, we just talked about communication and how we were feeling, and there's a lot of vulnerability in early pregnancy, of course, well, the entire pregnancy, but a lot in early pregnancy. And I think we were both kind of in that stage of like feeling a lot of vulnerability, and Jen just like talked it through with us, and that was really lovely.
Yeah, I remember talking about like, I don't know how much to share with you. Yeah. Right? Like I didn't know how much of the burden of pregnancy to share, right? Do I want to make them feel bad that I'm carrying their baby for them? Do I want to make them feel like they're involved because they know that I'm so nauseous I can't eat anything? You know, it's just like, how much do I want to share, and how much do they want to know? And so we were able to talk a lot about that kind of stuff in our appointments, not because I saved it for the appointments, but because conversations kind of led us to points where we could talk about some more vulnerable things because they just came up or those questions were asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. And I feel like that's actually not just awesome, but also very needed to have that, to create, not that it wasn't already there, but to create that extra open line of communication with kind of a third party present. And as by third party, I mean like Jen, Mercedes, or Ceci, you know, being there to just observe and guide and navigate and say like, it's okay to have this conversation. It's okay to talk about this. Like everybody's safe in this space, to really know the nitty gritty of both sides.
Yeah, it was great. And then Calder and my kids, like they'd pop into some of our appointments just based on like school and childcare stuff. So they all got to meet the midwives, and, you know, they were familiar faces when the day came. So leading up to our due date, Krista induced lactation. So I think you should talk about that because that was really cool.
Yeah, let's actually talk about it, because I loved just observing you feed baby Katie, just because I was like, oh, I want to hear more. Like I was gonna dig in, but thanks, Katie. We definitely need to get the details on that. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, so like our very first meeting, Katie asked me, "Do you think you want to do?" Or one of the things you said is, "I don't want to."
Yeah, that first brunch, I came with my like non-negotiables.
Yeah,
I had like a little note on my phone, I think, and I was like, "I'll this, you know, it was like home birth, whatever. I will not pump breast milk. That is not my forte. I don't love feeding babies. My body's not that. It's really good at giving birth. It's not that great at feeding babies. I don't. I want to go to sleep after I give birth.
I don't want a job. I'm done.
I don't want
job's
done.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. Well, after, our loss, I really looked into like what would it mean to like use a surrogate, and like how can I still be involved? How can I connect with the baby and my body? How can I provide for a baby with my body? And I had loved breastfeeding my son and breastfed him for a year. I hated pumping, but I loved breastfeeding. So I was like, I wanted to be able to do that. I can still do that. Holy shit, that's so cool. And Katie and I just like bonded in that moment. I remember we were at Starbucks and you were like, I know where to get the meds. I have a good doctor. Like, I have resources. I was like, holy, like, this is so great. This woman already has resources that can help me, do this whole journey. And so Katie sort of like hooked me up with her naturopath, who I think supported induced lactation previously. And yeah, she was really helpful. And so were our midwives. And so I believe I had an appointment with him in December and got my prescription. I started my meds in January, and I also worked with an IBCLC in Tacoma and just got their recommendations and some support with them. But yeah, started domperidone, which is a drug that has prolactin in it. And so I started taking that in January, and along with birth control. And it's just the oral birth control, which you take without the placebo, so continuously. And I think I started about a month later than I should have. So I was a little behind, or I felt like a little behind than what my protocol had advised. So I didn't start pumping as far before the birth as was recommended. I basically waited. I waited until 5 weeks prior to our due date to drop the birth control and start pumping. And so the idea is you take domperidone, which has a prolactin, and you're taking birth control, which elevates your progesterone and estrogen and mimics like a pregnancy, essentially. And then you take those consistently, and then you drop your birth control, continue taking the dom. And when the birth control drops, you're tricking your body into thinking you've birthed the baby, and you're doing that with and all of a sudden a really demanding pumping schedule. And so it starts creating milk for what it guesses is the baby you birthed. Gotcha. But I followed that protocol again. I stopped five weeks before, and I had amazing results when I started pumping. It was a little slow to get started. I felt really discouraged at first.
Oh my gosh.
Katie was like my incredible cheerleader. But within like a week, or I think on the third week, I was pumping 28 to 30 ounces a day. Just these incredible,
yes.
Like, let's put this into perspective. Most people who induce lactation maybe get like a couple ounces a day. Like, it is enough for like comfort nursing. It's, it's not a full supply. And so Chris is like sending me pictures of her pump, bottles, and they're like full of milk. And I'm like, she's like, oh, I just got a little bit. I'm like, what? Oh my God, your body's so good at this. Like, it was so good.
And my IBCLC was like, you, and both them and the doctor were both like, you'll probably have a higher likelihood of success because you did breastfeed your son. But you'll probably have to supplement at some point. That's what they had both warned me about. So I was fully anticipating like having like maybe some mediocre results, but it was incredible. Like, such success with pumping. And my body was ready once Katie was here I had full milk for her. Maybe too much.
But that's so amazing. Like, that is so amazing. And that just shows that like anything is possible, Like, that is so amazing. I think that's so awesome. And then you get to have that experience of bonding with Katie through breastfeeding.
Yes. I mean, it's just been really cool to like bond with her, to be able to provide something for my body, to just that connection is I'm so glad. I'm not having to pump anymore either, which I love. I do not enjoy that. But I also have the confidence of someone with a full freezer of breast milk because I made so much before she arrived that now I feel like, I feel really different than when I had my son. Like, I felt bad, like, leaving. I didn't really feel comfortable leaving him ever because I had to pump something to leave behind. And now I'm like, there's milk. Mm-hmm. We have milk. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so cool. And like from my perspective as the person carrying their baby, I loved that Krista did this. I knew that I was getting up to pee 4 times a night and Krista was getting up to pump multiple times a night. Like it was such a team effort. And I just love that we were in it together in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's super, super great. I think that it's super awesome that you guys did get to experience those 2 very different reasons for waking up, but also being in unison with like probably sending that like middle of the night text like, hey, you got this, like you could do it. I just got up to pee, but wanted to say, you're awesome or something like that, I think that's cool.
It was really cool. Yeah. Yeah. I was her boob cheerleader. But our boob cactus let's manifest this breast milk production.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, it worked.
Yeah, it all worked. Yeah. Do we want to talk about the birthday?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go ahead and dive into the birth of Katie.
I feel like I've talked about her birth so much. I'm like so curious to hear Krista's take on it.
Okay. Well, I think before the birth, we were starting to noticing, do you want to talk about leading up to the birth?
Yeah.
Just the first weeks?
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in too. But leading up to the birth, when Katie's we did surrogacy, I just thought, oh, this pregnancy, this birth, Katie knows what she's doing. It's gonna, and we talked about how it was different than your past. The pregnancy was different than what you had known before. And so as we started approaching her, your blood pressure was climbing. It wasn't anything dangerous, but it was higher than her baseline, her normal baseline. So we were watching that, and you were having some swelling. And so there was concern, okay, we want to make sure we preserve, we honor the home birth. We want to make sure we are able to do the home birth. And also, obviously, baby's health and Katie's health. Those were our priorities. Those three were our priorities.
Yeah, and Jen had mentioned, that there's evidence that preeclampsia and hypertension are higher with IVF patients than normal. And so the fact that I did have higher blood pressure readings and I was having swelling, they just were, really monitoring me closer than I had needed to be monitored in the past. And so we were all kind of like, all right, baby, when you're ready,
I want to say starting at 38 weeks, 37, 38, we started doing a lot of natural sort of.
Yeah, 38 weeks, really. I was like, okay, let's check my cervix. Let's see what's going on. Let's try.
Sweeps.
Yeah, let's sweep. Let's try to get her out sooner. And knowing that my previous births were spontaneous at 39-ish weeks, I was thinking the same would happen for this baby. But also knowing that typically it's a placenta that with my 39-week placentas, they were both very calcified and done with their jobs. But this placenta wasn't mine. So it was this kind of okay, my body says 39 weeks is the time. I don't know what my body / their baby is going to think about this one. So it was kind of a mind game for sure.
Yeah. And as we started, we were trying these natural inductions, I think you had castor oil at 38 weeks, maybe. You had some, and some sweeps. And she was not interested in moving. She was not interested in what we were trying.
The baby. She was like, no.
But in that moment, I realized, what if Katie is doing this really? I mean, we're doing this together, but she's doing this. She's motivated to do this because she wants this birth, this home birth. Mm-hmm. And we all wanted this home birth, but especially Katie. And in the end, I was never worried about our baby. I was never worried about Arcadia. but health or well-being. But I was like, what if we end up transferring to a hospital? And, I had only known in my pregnancies an outcome that I didn't want, but I had never really thought about the possibility that this might go to something we didn't want. And then I started getting worried towards the end. I'm like, like you said earlier, Katie, you would experience that as grief. And I knew you would. That would be a loss for you.
Yeah.
To have a hospital birth. And so I started thinking about like, how do I support while caring for my newborn? How do I support Katie? I never really thought about that before because I had been so like, I really just trusted this is going to work out. This is going to work out exactly as we wanted. And then I started thinking like, what if it doesn't, sort of having these like, nothing paralyzing, but just starting to like think about how do we work through something like that? That was just concern, worry, because we did not end up in a hospital, fortunately.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I was having the same freak out of like, oh no, what if I have to transfer to a hospital? And we had played this game earlier on. Like we had to put it into like legal paperwork where we would transfer to in the case of a hospital transfer prenatally or during birth. So we had talked through that reality, but I remember when I was so swollen, like my ankles were so swollen, and Mercedes was like, let's just run some labs. She was just so calm.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I went home and I realized I was spiraling. Like my brain would not stop thinking about the hospital transfer and what that meant for our birth, especially with COVID protocols and like, having our birth photographer and my husband and Krista and Crispin and Calder. Like I wanted all of these people to experience this birth with us. And how was that going to happen in a hospital? And so anyway, I was just spiraling. And I texted Mercedes. I'm like, can you put those labs in like stat? like, can you rush them? And she's like, yep, I'm on it. You'll have results tonight. So when those results came in that I, didn't have preeclampsia at that point, I just was so relieved. And I'm like, It's not that the hospital is a bad guy. Like I support hospital births as a doula all the time. And I've seen really beautiful births happen in the hospital. That just wasn't what I wanted for this. Mm-hmm. And had it been necessary, sure, we would have done it, and we would have done it in the best way possible. But like that is just not what we desired. Yeah.
So the other thing, I think, as we approached the end of the pregnancy, I started feeling just a lot of kind of sorrow for it. I was excited because I was going to meet our daughter. And it's been this fulfillment of this dream we've had. But I also started feeling really sort of like really tender and really sort of sad about the end of this incredible journey, because it was, there were so many surprises, and it was just so wonderful, the relationship we had built. And we knew, like, I remember I finally told you, like, I'm feeling really sad about this ending. And you're like, I am too. And, we knew how to do surrogacy. I mean, we didn't a year ago. We didn't know how to do it, but we learned and became really good at doing
we
this.
We are the poster children for surrogacy. Everyone should have this.
Our relationship has so been built around this pregnancy that then as we started to approach the end of that and the beginning of something else, I was like, I mean, I knew we'd be good at friendship too, outside of pregnancy that we were doing together, but we had never practiced it. We had never done it. And it is like a really interesting, like the relationship changes.
It does. It does. And from my perspective, it was like, I was needed, right? I was needed during surrogacy. I was how you were going to finish your family. And then once she was born, the question in my mind, during the end of the pregnancy was, what does my role become? And I liked feeling needed. I'm gonna cry. And yeah, it was like contractually they needed me. Not that this ever really felt like a contractual like transaction, but contractually we had an obligation to each other. And once the baby's born, there's no contractual obligation, really. Like I can't say like, you have to be my friend, you have to let me hold your baby. Like there's none of that, right? And I knew that we loved each other and we were friends and we were close by, but you just don't know, like especially with a family with a newborn, right? Like there's so much that shifts within your own nuclear family that like, how do I fit into that? And I didn't know. And so I was mourning the like end of this thing that felt so right. But it has continued to feel right. So
yeah, it's just, it's like it's just a relationship that's taken a different shape and like a different, but I just remember feeling sort of like tender about that big change, that shift, and yeah, kind of grieving the end of this journey, that connection where our baby was, she was with you and being able to like see you and her together, and I don't know, like that was like a big part of the last few weeks, just like feeling all those feelings. But the day, her birthday, which was also her due date, we had a midwife appointment that day.
So let's just say that again. I carried a baby to 40 weeks. 40 weeks. And there was no, like, I knew there was no way my body would do that. Yeah. Wrong. So wrong.
Gotcha.
So wrong.
Gotcha.
Oh my gosh. So many gotcha moments. Like, I was so wrong. And this was like the worst prank ever. And the day before, so she was born on June 22nd, her due date, but the day before was solstice. And I was like, she wants to be a solstice baby. So I was like, 21st, I was like, this is it. This is the day. And then that day, I did not feel at all like I was going to go into labor that day. She was riding high up in my belly, and I was like, yeah.
Katie was like, I feel too good.
Yeah. Every day, like this pregnancy felt, she wasn't low, and I carried my keepers low. And so I was able to do all the normal things. Like I was walking a lot. I was working out a ton. I went on a 7-mile bike ride on the 21st, like the night before she came, like hoping that maybe that would bounce her out, and it didn't. She was just really cozy in there. So on the 22nd, we were like, okay, eviction notice served. We mean business. Yeah.
I think Jen instructed you to take the
castor oil
before the midwife appointment.
Yeah.
At which we had a sweep.
Castor oil, sweep at the appointment. And
chased by more castor oil.
Yeah. Came home and did another round of castor oil. So it was like 10 a.m. castor oil, 12 o'clock sweep, 2 p.m. castor oil. And then we're all like, dun, dun, dun. Like, what is going to happen? And I was like, nothing's happening.
Right.
Nothing's happening.
I mean, let's rewind back to Katie saying that she's always in denial too. Yeah. So I think that's a big part of like, when you were in labor on the 22nd, you were still denying you were, right?
100% in denial. So the first time I had taken castor oil, like a week or two before, I didn't have it. I mean, I had some cramping, but like, I had always heard, you take castor oil and then you're going to go to the bathroom and it's going to be awful. And that didn't happen to me. So I had taken castor oil at 10 o'clock, and by 2 o'clock, I was feeling crampy from the membrane sweep. Like Jen really got in there and did a good job.
But she's really good at sweeps.
She is brutal. Mercedes too. Mercedes was that one was the hardest one. But I was just like, this still doesn't feel like labor to me. And I had told my husband, or I asked my husband if he would pick up the kids that day, knowing that we were going to do castor oil and a sweep. And so he went and picked up the kids. And by the time they were heading home, I was on the toilet. And I was like, okay, this is different, right? 2 rounds of castor oil. Okay, it's cleaning me out. That's good. But I still wasn't feeling laborish. And so we took the kids on a walk. We walked like a mile and a half or 2 miles. And I was having contractions the whole time. But part of my denial is I have an irritable uterus every pregnancy. And this time it started probably around 32-ish weeks, where it's like I'm having Braxton Hicks contractions, every 4 to 6 minutes. And that's just how my day goes every day. So it's really hard to know, okay, what's cramp from a membrane sweep? What's a Braxton Hicks contraction? What are those doing together? And is this turning into active labor? And so we're on this walk and I'm having contractions every like 2 to 3 minutes, but it's not enough to like stop me from walking. you know, I was just like an uncomfortable pregnant lady at that point, but I wasn't like, man, this is it. We came home, we had dinner, like tucked the kids in. I texted Krista, no, I don't think it's happening tonight.
Yeah. Denial.
I
didn't know this piece. I didn't know you were a denier. So I was like, okay, it's not happening. Well, I have plans. I'm going to go unless you want me
to. You didn't know this? I thought.
You did not tell me you were a denier. Her best friend knew that.
Yes.
But I was like, okay, well, you know, I was like, I'm going to have dinner, but we can move dinner to be closer to home. If that works, if that's better. So I'm like closer to West Seattle. And she's like, no, just go ahead and go with your plan. Don't change anything. I'll just be in touch if something changes. Something changed. I had gotten the check, I think around 9. I had gotten the check, and you texted and said, okay, I'm in labor. And then it wasn't even, I think it was like not even 6 minutes later, you called me. Actually, you called me the first time and said you were in labor. And then you called me back like 6 minutes later and said my water broke. Mm-hmm. And I was like, we are already in the car. I was already driving home at that point.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll be there as soon as I can. But I had to stop home, pick up my son and husband, and then head to your place, which I think we got there within like 40 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah, the big worry this whole time was like, what if it happens so fast? Yeah. Knowing that like I had fairly precipitous labors, and with my son, my second, I pushed for 16 minutes. So from a 4-hour pushing to a 16-minute pushing, I was afraid that if my water broke with this one, that it was going to be like, 20 minutes to baby. And at that membrane sweep that day, I was already 5 centimeters dilated. So we knew I didn't have a whole lot to go. So it was like, okay, can you just come?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but I was totally in denial because like our birth photographer, Kyle, she lives probably like 45 minutes away, and she was in town doing a shoot, and she's like, she's like, what's happening? Do you think I should stick around? And I'm like, no, you should go home. So I told her to go home. I told Chris to go to dinner. Like I told our midwives to go to bed. Like I told them all. I was in such denial. Oh man.
And then everybody got that heart attack notice. Like, oh crap, we gotta go now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. Yep, it's happening.
So our family got there around 10, I think just after 10, and Katie's best friend Nikki was already there. She was a part of our birth team. She was there to like watch the kids, just to keep them, just have someone there to like kind of support them. And if there was a transfer, we would have childcare. She had beat us there. She lives in West Seattle. And then our midwife showed up right after I got there, and the birth photographer. So everyone kind of just arrived right around 10.
Yeah, it was like between 10 and 10:15, like everybody showed up.
Was on the scene.
And by that point, I was in like full on hard labor. I think I was probably fully dilated. I was at least in transition at that point. What had happened on my end was, I was in denial, and then I tucked my kids in, and I was sitting in my son's room in his rocking chair because normally I lay with him at night, and I couldn't comfortably lay with him anymore. My giant belly. So I was sitting in his rocking chair as he fell asleep, and I think it was that like dark, quiet room with a big, huge rush of oxytocin that just like did me in. And I got up and I left his room, and I was like, this feels different. And I texted Jen, my midwife, and I said, I don't think I can sleep through this. I think you should go to sleep. But I'm so crampy that like I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. And she said, well, if you feel like it, you could try having a glass of wine and go to bed early. So that was my plan. And yeah, so I got my glass of wine and was out on our deck. And I was just like, oh yeah, this is not getting any better. This is actually getting more intense. And I'm like leaning over the railing on the deck, breathing and swaying. And my husband knew exactly what was going on, right? He's like, oh, I've seen this one before. So I'm like, okay, I think it's happening. And it was at that point when I was outside that I like made the phone calls and sent the SOS, like, okay, it's happening. And I walked inside and had another contraction. And that's when I felt like my waters break. But still, it was like just a little bit, right? It wasn't like a huge gush. It was like I had a panty liner in, and it was enough to like soak my panty liner, but that was it. It wasn't like every step there was gush, gush, gush. So I'm like, did it break? I don't know. So it was just more fuel to add to my denier status. And but I was like, whatever. I'm just gonna call them all, and if it doesn't pick up, and if my water didn't actually break, I will just ask the midwives to break my water, and we will just have a baby tonight. Like that was my thought process. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we didn't need that. We didn't need that. So yeah, they all trickled in, and
the tub was being filled up, I think, when I arrived.
Yeah.
And so one of the things Katie had done, I want to say a month prior to birth, is she had given me she was like, "You're my doula." I'm not professionally trained as a doula, but she's like, "You're going to be my doula, and you're going to support me through this." And she's, being organized and incredibly detail oriented. She was like, "These are all the things I need in birth." And we had gone through the list extensively, so I knew my role, and it was nice because I like knew what I needed to do from the job perspective. But I was also anxious to just be really present too. But yeah, I sort of like referred to that list, although I don't know how heavily, because I think a lot of the stuff had already been done by your husband and Nikki before we arrived. And she'd also, in that conversation, the doula download conversation, she had told me how she shows up in birth, and we had also watched one of your birth videos for Kelson, your son. So I kind of knew what to be prepared for, even though I had never been at a birth before. But I also didn't know exactly how it would be until I was there in the moment. Katie is I haven't attended other births, so I don't know, but I feel like you're a very unusual birther.
I am. And I will say that as somebody who has attended a lot of births, I am an unusual birther.
You had already told me you're a very autonomous birther. Yeah. But she is also like, there's a lot of levity in the birth. So Katie would be in a contraction, like a really intense contraction, and I took a lot of notes just by observing other people who have been with you in other births. Like I was looking at your best friend, looking at Dan, looking at Mercedes and Jen, and then everyone would be quiet and serious, and then you'd be out of your contraction, and you'd just be like telling jokes, telling stories, laughing,
checking my cervix, like oh my goodness.
I'm like, is this normal? Okay, I guess this is normal.
Yeah.
Katie's normal, at least. But that was really cool. I mean, it was like, for me, it was like so cool to not just be at a birth, but to also be at my daughter's birth. And to also it was just this like lovely way of like to know Katie, I think, is to know this really important part of her life, which is birthing. And so it was just another way of the intimacy being built. Like, I got to know you as a birther, and I know one of the questions that you have is, give me a word for birth. And I think for me, it was transformative to be there. It was transformative to like watch you, to know you in this way, to meet our daughter. Yeah, I walked out of that room, and it's written on my heart. Like that experience is like completely it's changed me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Yes to all of that. As a doula, I believe in doulas, and I can't really imagine giving birth without a doula, but also knowing that I am a very autonomous birther, and we were already planning to have a lot of people in our birth space. So we knew it was going to be our midwifery team, and obviously Krista and Crispin and my husband and our kids, who were all very excited to be a part of the birth, and we wanted them all to experience that. In fact, Krista once said to me, like, how cool is it for Kelson, your youngest child, to be the youngest child and stay the youngest child, but also be able to see your mom go through a pregnancy and birth. Like, nobody gets to do that. And I'm like, yeah, that is really cool. And he loved it. Like, he's the president of the Arcadia fan club. But anyway, there were a lot of people in the birth space, and then we also wanted to have it documented, and that was one of the things I wanted from the get-go too, was people who were okay and even excited about having a birth photographer. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of people there, and to have a doula on top of all of that, it was like, okay, that's the middle school. Like, we are saturated. I also wanted Krista and Crispin to feel involved to the point where they could help me with the things that I needed help with, but also have an ability, like, have a job to do and not feel like we're just sitting here staring at this person birthing our baby and going through something really big. But I didn't want to overwhelm them with like a to-do list of things. So it was this interesting balance of like, okay, here's some things that need to get done. Yeah. Like changing the sheets on the bed, filling the birth tub, like, putting essential oils in my diffuser. Like, here's the things that need to get done. And some of them you can do. Some of them my husband and Nikki will do. But if you want something to do because you're feeling like, what should I do now? Here's a list. Yeah. And then here are the things that I like and don't like in labor. And so that was great because Krista was right there the whole time, like squeezing my hips and, just like so present with every contraction. And it was awesome. It was awesome. She was an amazing doula. She can join my team at any point.
Hello, baby.
Yes. So yeah, once everybody got there, I was just like waiting for the midwives to arrive because I felt really pushy. Like, I felt like if I sat on the toilet to pee, which I needed to do, that I was going to push a baby out on the toilet. And so I waited until they got there to empty my bladder. I had some really big contractions on the toilet. And then once the tub was good to go, I got in the tub pretty fast. Yeah. And I was checking my own cervix at that point, and I could tell that she was really low. I remember checking her and saying she's like partway down my like knuckle. So I could feel her head, but to me it felt like her bag of water was still intact. Like, it was very slippery. And when I would push with those contractions, because I started pushing pretty immediately after I got in the tub. Mm-hmm. And when I would push, it was just like, she's not moving. I could feel her. And she was not moving. So eventually I asked Jen to break my water because I was pretty sure it was not broken. And she checked me and she's like, yeah, no, your water's broken. That's the baby's, like, that's her hair. She's got a lot of hair. I'm like, dang it. So she said, you do have a cervical lip. So I like leaned forward, and actually Jen suggested, she said, like, if you want to try to like hold back the cervical lip yourself, you can. And I did, and which was really cool. I had never seen anyone do that. I'd never thought to do it myself, and I did, and it hurt like hell. But it was great because I could really feel the difference in that change, how it like allowed her to move down. And after I did that for a couple contractions, she was like right there. And yeah.
And at that point, I think there was this is sort of surprised me too, but there was this nonverbal communication by Mercedes. She just sort of looked at me. Like that look, and I was like, it's time.
Oh, I know the look.
Yeah. It's time for me to get into the tub. I think this is like, I don't remember her actually saying anything. It was just like, yeah. So I got into the birthing tub. They kind of told me where to be, and I got in.
Yeah.
Sort of behind you, next to you, behind you.
Yeah.
And you, I think, had 2 big pushes.
Yeah.
And she was out.
Yeah, so the first big push, like, I birthed her head. Yeah. And so, like, you could feel her head.
Yeah.
And, like, I felt her because I was feeling for a nuchal cord, but I felt her cute little ear. And no cord, no nuchal hand, thank you. So, yeah, one big push, her head was out, and Krista was like, I feel her. Yeah. And then the next push, it was the same contraction. Her body came out with that contraction and that push, and right into Krista's hands. kind of behind me. I was in like kind of a kneeling position, kind of leaning forward. And so Krista just picked her up, and I just flipped around and did some acrobatics and then pulled my foot up over the cord.
Katie was like in Circus Soleil or something. She stepped over the cord, just like she had done it a million times before. And there was just like a lot in that moment. There was just like a lot, obviously, that I was like feeling and processing, but also a lot of direction.
Yeah.
From the midwives
and
you.
Yeah, because it was like, we didn't want her to drown, right? Yeah. So it was like, when she comes out of the water, she can't go back in. But then it was like, oh, the cord's short, so don't pull her up. Don't, you know, it was just like a lot of logistical movements.
Right.
And while there's this like huge emotional like rush. So anyway, to watch that video back is really, it's really interesting. It's like, don't do that. You know,
put her out here. Put it out. Put it back.
Yeah.
Not in the water. It was just like a flood of like a lot of, you know, it was, you can only plan so much.
Yeah.
And it was choreography that I didn't know the steps for yet.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Jen knew that we wanted to like have a really hands-off birth.
Yeah.
And so her hands were nearby, and they like reached in a couple times when, you know, when she thought that they were needed, which was great. And then, but the rest of it was all Krista. She just caught her baby.
Yeah. And then we snuggled real close.
I got really close, and I was just like, we're going to be really close. And we kind of had to hold her between us, which was kind of beautiful. I put my arm around Krista, and we just co-held her. And it was really cool.
Yeah.
There's a great picture of Crispin and Calder. Like, Crispin's got like a single tear, and they were right there watching every bit of it.
Yeah, we were surrounded. There was a lot of love in the room.
Yeah.
And she was born in 11/19.
Yeah, so an hour after everyone got there, which was great timing.
You were in the tub for about 30 minutes?
I think about 40-ish. Yeah. Yeah, so I had to push a little longer with her than I had anticipated, but she came out.
And then I feel like we just held her together for a while, and then I stepped out of the tub. I gave her back to you so that Katie could get out of the tub easily.
And that was helpful too, because that's something that we had talked about prenatally. Like, how are we going to get out of the tub? Like, are you okay with me holding your baby and carrying her? Like, do we want to cut the cord and then have you carry her? Like, you know, we had talked about all of these things. So we knew, like, okay, we'd rather have her stay attached to the placenta. And, you know, just for safety, it's probably easiest if I carried her and she stayed, like, close to me as long as we needed for, you know, to birth the placenta.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. So we got over to, we didn't stay in the tub for long, but we walked over to the bed and we just kind of all piled in. So thankfully we have a king size bed, and it was like me and Arcadia was on my belly, and then Krista and Crispin and Calder were all right there. Placenta, like, that was one thing that I was a little nervous about just with IVF pregnancies. There's a little bit more, there's some good research, but there's a lot of anecdotal stories about, you know, stickier placentas and more higher rates of hemorrhage. And so hers really just came out effortlessly 10 minutes later. And she stayed attached. So after her placenta was born, then she went straight to Krista, and her placenta stayed attached to her, but just like in a little Chuck's pad. And then you got to feed her. Yeah. Skin to skin.
First latch. She was great. She was a great eater. It was a little awkward at first because it had been, 9 years, and Mercedes reminded me, put her body next to your body, tummy to tummy, and put her nose on your breast. I think that was the other advice she had. But she latched right away, and she was a happy little eater, and it was like a really like easy easy post-birth experience. It was really special just to be all together. And we were all together until I think birth team left around 2:30 in the morning, 2:33.
Yeah, so she was 8 pounds, which was the biggest baby I've ever birthed. Probably also because she was the longest, like gestation I'd never done, but super healthy. And so we did the newborn exam in bed, and everybody like passed her around and got a chance to hold her, which was fun. My son had gone to bed, but he woke up at like 2 or something.
Yeah.
So he got to hold her, which was fun. And then
Katie cut the cord.
oh yeah, I cut the cord. That was really special.
That's like it was something that you were interested in doing. And
yeah, well, we had talked about maybe Calder, their son, doing it, and I was like, I will defer to Calder. Like, if Calder wants to cut the cord, I'm like, that's cool. But he was like, no, I'm good. So
yeah, and it felt like a nice, like, beautiful, like, symbolic way to, you know, kind of make that transition from carrying a baby to passing her to her parents, and I don't know, just honoring your role.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so then it was obviously very late at night, early morning, and we were like, do you want to stay here? And they were like, yeah, we do. So they stayed in our guest room that night, and that was awesome because then we woke up the next morning and we just got to enjoy each other and enjoy her, and we had coffee, we ordered lunch, and we just hung out for a while. Yeah, it was just
went back
great.
to the bed.
Yeah.
Just hung on the bed.
Yeah, they came to me. It was wonderful. That was our bird.
Oh my gosh, you guys, my cheeks. I am just sitting here smiling, and I just love this story so much.
So do I. Like, so do
Yeah.
I. It's so cool.
All of the details are just so amazing, and this is like so individual to y'all's birth experience together, you know, and the fact that Krista, you got to catch Katie. Like, that is so cool. And the fact that big gestational carrier Katie, you got to like birth her in a way that was empowering to you again, and also being able to guide Krista in being your doula. Like, that is so awesome to have had that relationship develop so strongly during your pregnancy that you're like, hey, you're in this too.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, this is like your role, and I love that. I love that so much. There are so many positive things that happened in this experience, and I'm just so elated for both of you that it happened the way that it did, and both of you got to experience your home birth. You had really supportive providers, and Krista, you got to breastfeed right away, and I think that's amazing. Like, that is so awesome to be able to have that bond from the get-go. And then Katie, you got to cut the cord to, you know, do that kind of ceremonial like separation of and to your parents you go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at this whole journey, and you know, it's not even over. Our journey's not over. I mean, the actual, like, you know, growing and birthing a baby is over, but our story isn't over. Yeah. But I look at what has transpired, and I just, you know, I think the word that sticks with me, not about the birth, but just about the process, is trust. I think the fact that Krista and Crispin just trusted me this entire time. I never felt like there was a moment where they were questioning me or questioning my intuition or my desires or my ability or the safety of their baby or anything. And I think that's really hard to do. And it just felt so safe and honest and trusting. And like, that is a testament to them as human beings, that they could just trust me so much. It just was really cool. And that really made this experience for me, because I didn't ever feel like I was being watched or I was not doing things right, or that I could have done something different or better or safer, or, you know,
we weren't managing you.
You weren't managing me at all. It wasn't like, oh, what is she eating? How much weight is she gaining? What's her blood pressure today? Like, it was just, how are you? Mm-hmm. How are you feeling? What do you need? How can we support you? Yeah, it was really cool.
Well, we trusted you. So
I know.
She's the ultimate babysitter, really.
Really?
On the inside and outside. But I think the other cool thing is, like, Katie acknowledged, like, this isn't over. Like, Katie, big Katie, has such a sacred role in all of our lives, but especially in Arcadia's life. And She's now Aunt Katie.
Aunt Katie.
So this little one. And just a note, Arcadia means a place of peace and contentment. And I think that's how we all feel. That's how I feel. Like every day since her birth. Yeah.
You guys.
It's been magical.
I know.
I love it.
It's really like the best thing ever. And I just, not that I want people to seek surrogacy, because like surrogacy shouldn't exist, honestly. Like everybody who wants to have a baby should be able to have their own babies, right? But it does exist. And I just think that like, it's really cool that we can have a partnership like this. It's almost like sister wives, right? Like the fact, but in a different aspect, in that like the pregnancy and postpartum, like Krista didn't experience the pregnancy. She has experienced postpartum in a way of like caring for and nurturing her baby, and you know, the emotions that go with that, and I've experienced pregnancy in the like physical aspect of it, but then postpartum, I'm able to sleep and heal and rest while she's doing, you know, waking up at night and feeding and changing diapers. And so it's like this beautiful partnership in so many ways, but my postpartum experience has been amazing in comparison to my keeper births, because I have been able to pass on the duty of motherhood to Krista. And it's like, it's such a cool thing. I'm like, I wish everyone could have this partnership, but not have to have this partnership. You know what I mean?
It has been the best collaboration.
Yeah. I would say Krista got enough sleep leading up to birth, but she didn't choose pumping. So.
Yeah. That's true. But Krista, how is postpartum going for you with having the sleep deprivation and doing the feedings and all of those things?
I mean, it's been, I hate to admit it, but it's been really easy.
You should admit it. That's so cool.
She's like she's very content. She's really living up to her name as well. But Arcadia really, she's a great sleeper. She'll wake up, but she doesn't cry. She just she co-sleeps with us. So she makes just her little like feeding noises. Lets me know that she kind of clicks her tongue and her lips. And I'll just feed her. She feeds a couple times a night. Actually, I think last night she slept through the night. She slept like 7-hour stretch. So it's really been easy. I mean, the thing that surprised me that I forgot about is how much babies slow you down. That 9-year age gap, really, I've forgotten all that information about having a newborn. But other than that, like, she's just been such a dream. It's been like a really easy transition, and our son has just taken to being a big brother so well. It's been such a big part of, you know, this desire for to grow our family this way has been such a big part of our family story, and he's heard it growing up, so he was really excited. He's been excited about every step of the process, and now he's stoked that she's here. And so, yeah, I don't know, it's been easy.
Yeah, it's been fun from my perspective to see Krista as a mom of a baby. Like, obviously, I've gotten to see her as a mom of a 8 and 9-year-old, but she just doesn't stop. Like she's like an old pro, you know? And even though it's been 9 years, it's like, I don't know. You guys were, even the weekend, 'cause she was born late on a Friday night, early Saturday. And it was like, even that weekend, you guys you're planning your picnic parties for end of school year, and you just go. And she's been all over the place, and she's met everyone. And I just love this life of hers. It's really cool to see.
I love all of that. I think all of that is just so amazing and so great. And the fact that both of you are on this journey together still, I love that both of you agreed and said that this isn't the end. You know, it's just a new beginning, to be honest, a new beginning of what it looks like for the dynamic of your families together. And I think that is it's just so joyous and amazing. And I'm so happy for you guys. I really am. I'm just so happy. And my heart is full hearing this story. It has come full circle. And I just love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do too.
Yeah. I think, you know, one thing that I think a lot of people are curious about with surrogacy, like the biggest question people ask me now is, like, how are you emotionally? How was it giving the baby back or giving her away, right? And I think that question usually comes out of a place of like care, not out of judgment. But it's just, there was never a time during this process where I felt like she was mine to keep. It was always like she was theirs to give back. So seeing her land in the arms and presence of her parents was just like so peaceful. It was, a full circle thing. And hormonally, it's been so much better because I'm sleeping. I think with postpartum hormones, they're just compounded when you have a lack of sleep or interrupted sleep cycles. And I just have been great and so happy that she's where she should be. Like I love seeing her, and I think part of my emotional like contentment is that I do get to see her often, and I get to see that she's in the right place and she's well cared for and she's so loved, and I'm sure like just holding her like helps my hormones. But I there's it's just this whole thing has been such a gift to me. Not I'm gonna cry again, but not, people are like, oh, what a gift that you just gave them. And it's like, what a gift that they gave me to have this experience and for my family to have this experience. Like, how cool is it to do this and see this pan out, and how my kids get to experience like to them it's like no big deal. Oh yeah, my mom grew a baby for another family and we get to see her all the time and we love her. Like, that's so cool. It's been such a gift for all of us.
It has. Yeah. We gave each other a gift. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. I think it's so great. Yes, you guys definitely did give each other a gift, and I can hear it and see it just in the dynamic of watching you guys as we're doing this interview. I just love it. You guys are just all smiles and all support and just being there for each other emotionally through both sides, When Krista was talking about her story and her journey of deciding to search for surrogacy, and Krista, you talking about your journey of you deciding, okay, I'm ready for this, and that whole dynamic of everything I just love. And I I Katie, I really do appreciate that you brought up your emotional side of it as well, because there's very much an emotional side on both sides of the book, both sides of this story. And it's really important to bring that up as well. And we did touch on Krista's lactation. But Katie, how was your journey of lactation? Did you have to hinder your lactation?
I did. It was not awesome. So my history with breastfeeding is really shaped around the fact that I had a breast reduction when I was in college. And so my breast tissue was impacted tremendously, and my milk ducts, many of them, probably most of them, were severed during that process. And you just don't know how that's going to pan out until you try, right? And so after I gave birth to my first, it was not super obvious to me that I wasn't adequately feeding my baby until, a lactation consultant came over and she had lost too much weight and the words failure to thrive were used. And then I'm in the throes of like, I'm trying so hard and I'm postpartum and I'm hormonal and I'm failing, right? Like, that's just how it all felt. And it just became this like pumping, feeding, SNS, like, oh, we were doing all the things, right? And it just was so hard. And it was never enough. And then the second time I kind of planned for that to be, and it was a little bit better. My body made more milk, but I still pumped a lot and used a lot of donor milk for him. And then this time I was like, well, hopefully with no baby around and, no nipple stimulation, like my body's just not even going to get the memo that it's going to need to make milk. But it definitely did get the memo that it needed to make milk. I think it was like day 4, really day 3 or 4 postpartum, where my breast started to get like very swollen and hard, and it was really painful. And I had seen a lactation specialist, Dr. Marianne O'Hara. She's a doctor that specializes in breastfeeding. And we had talked through a plan to suppress lactation prenatally, and that was helpful. I mean, honestly, I wasn't going to take medication, prescription medication to suppress, because I had some other contraindicators that wouldn't work well with the meds. But I did do the like Sudafed, Benadryl, antihistamines. And what really helped me with the pain was warm showers, like light hand expression, and time and patience. Mm-hmm. So that's what we did. And it was a few days of really painful nights, and then it went away. And so like I can still, we're 2 months postpartum now, and I can still express milk like really easily. But it's not a big deal. I'm not leaking, I'm not having letdowns. So yeah, it's fine.
It's good to hear your journey with your lactation hindrance and stopping that as well, because that's also part of the journey. So I think that that's awesome that you found out a way to do that, and that your body responded well to that process of hindering your lactation.
Yeah, so a lot of surrogates will ship milk. They'll pump like contractually, they plan to pump milk and then ship to the intended parents. If they're not geographically close, which being 10 minutes apart is so rare for people going, on this journey. Most people will match with somebody who's like states away. So a lot of surrogates will pump and ship. And then some whose intended parents don't want breast milk might choose to donate it or sell it locally. But for me, it was like, yep, I don't want to do this. And Krista was like, great, I do. So I'm just really grateful that was pretty smooth for both of us.
Good team.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think it just, earlier, Krista, you were mentioning how intuition was a big part of your story here. And throughout your story and your journey, I'm hearing it. I'm hearing all the just like the intuitions and like how everything kind of just lined up perfectly for you guys in a way of Katie, you putting your boundaries just like in the forefront, being like, I am so happy to be a surrogate, but these are my deal breakers. And Krista, you were like, cool, thanks for letting me know, because I feel like we're on the same page. So
should I tell her about the dream?
Ooh, tell me about the dream. Do it. You mentioned it. Now you got to say it.
The dream. Okay. So when I was pregnant with Delphine, so this was 8 years ago, I had a dream of giving birth to her. And the funny thing is, this is when I was still on like the hospital route of like giving birth in a hospital, which none of the hospitals around here, well, there's one now, but at the time, none of the hospitals would allow water births. So I had this dream that I gave birth to her in the water, and I like lifted this baby up, and I remembered what she looked like, right? Like this little cute baby with dark hair and very chubby round cheeks. And I gave birth to my daughter on land, not in the tub, and I lifted her up, and I was like, well, that's not the baby from my dreams. Like, that's just not what you look like at all. But I didn't really think much about it. I think people have, random dreams all the time. But I definitely had this dream kind of imprinted in my mind. And so then when I was pregnant with our son, we didn't know if he was a boy or a girl. We waited to find out. And so I had this thought like, oh, maybe my dream was of him. He was born in the water, but he was a boy. And in this dream, it was definitely a girl that I gave birth to. So I had forgotten about this dream, right? This was many, many years ago. But a few months prior to her birth, a couple months maybe, I was like, oh my gosh, I know this is weird, but what if this dream that I had 8 years ago was your baby. I know it's crazy, but if she's born in the water, and this is what she will look like, she'll have a ton of dark hair, which is funny because like their son didn't have a ton of dark hair at birth. I didn't have a reason to think like, oh, well, obviously this baby's going to have a ton of hair. And this was before the midwives had checked my cervix where they said like, oh, we feel hair. Like there wasn't an ultrasound that said there was a lot of hair, nothing. It was just like, I had this dream and there's this baby is born in the water. It was a girl. She looked just like this. Like, I don't know. Let's see. I know I'm kind of cuckoo, but like, what if? And the moment she was born and I like turned around and looked at her face, I was like, that's the baby. Like there's no denying. 100% of me knows this is the baby from my dreams 8 years ago. That like I was always meant to know her. I was always meant to carry her and to birth her. And like that was before she was even an embryo. Right? Yeah. Like it was before your loss. It was before the start of this story. And I knew her. And it's just so crazy. And I mean, I know that sounds wild, but it happened. And it's really special.
I think that's one of the first things you said when you met her. You said, I've always known you. It's you. It's you.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Dreams are crazy. Dreams really work like that. Like, yeah,
they do.
They really do. I've had a couple of situations with dreams as well, like where I had my husband's best friend was like dating this girl, and I had this dream that she was pregnant, and I was like, oh, like that's weird. I've never seen this girl before. And so when I woke up, I asked my husband, I was like, show me a picture of this girl. And he showed me a picture, and I was like, oh, she was in my dream. She's pregnant. And my husband was like, oh, that'd be so funny because like it's his best friend and he was by no means anywhere ready for a kid. And I think it was like the next week, and he had called his best friend and said, oh, Kiona just had this dream that like your girlfriend's pregnant. Like, isn't that funny? And he was like, oh God, I hope not. Like that would be terrifying. And then the next week they called us and she was pregnant. So
Whoa.
It was crazy. It was crazy.
See?
I was like, whoa.
You get it. You get it. Like, I've had some interesting dreams in the past too that were very telling of like big life events, but always like at the time of them happening. Right? Like it was always within like, within a week or two or a month of like big things transpiring. Never like 8 years.
Right.
It's so wild. But yeah, she just came out with this perfect little squishy round face and this dark head of hair with her cute little part combed over to the side. And that was the baby. That was her. Right? Yeah. Was you.
Oh, I love that. Well, Krista and Katie, I have a couple of closing questions for you all. Krista, you had mentioned your word before, but I would love to bring it up again. You said your one word from this experience of the birth was transformative.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Katie, how was that? What's one word that you would describe this birth experience and surrogacy journey as for you?
Well, she stole my word. No. I think for me, it's empowered. Like powerful or empowered. I'm not sure. I think they're very similar in meanings, but I mean, I just feel every step of this process felt empowering. The like learning process of the surrogacy part, and then the birth itself. It was just such an empowering experience, and like in all ways. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think both of them are fantastic words. Not that I get to say what your word is or not. I think that they're so great and so positive. And I love it. It really puts in, after hearing your story, your words of choice put it a lot into perspective from like how you both experienced it. Another question that I have, and I didn't prepare you guys for this prior either, I guess I have to do better because I don't really prepare many people for it, is if you were to have a resource for someone that wanted to go through a surrogacy process, where's the first direction you would send them?
I think one of the things, and this is just a good starting point, is there's a resource on Instagram called The Biggest Ass.
You stole mine.
I mean, I sort of stumbled my way into like learning about surrogacy after my loss, because a lot of these resources are newer and didn't exist then. And so I did it sort of this really homegrown way where I was part of my mom's group on Facebook at the time. And so I asked them, do you want to know anyone personally who's done surrogacy? And through that, I met a couple people. And through another friend, I met another intended father. And I just set up interviews. So that's how I did it back in the day. But I think right now, this is the best landing page to start at. And they have like a lot of resources built up and just a lot of great information. Is The Biggest Ask. And that's on Instagram. And they have resources for both surrogates and intended parents.
Yeah, and they do weekly support calls. So wherever you are in the journey, you can call in and listen or ask questions. So
that's awesome. That sounds like an amazing resource.
Yeah, and there's not like an underlying like goal for them other than to just like help people through the journey. It's not like they're not trying to monetize things on Instagram. Like it's not about that. It's really about just helping people navigate this wild journey.
Yeah, it's very organic. It's started by two moms who one is an intended mother and the other is a gestational carrier.
Yeah, not for each other.
Yeah. Just friends. They met through the process or through like some sort of surrogacy group, and they want to help other people. So that's been great.
Great.
Yes. So that is also what I would say for the surrogacy journey. If you're specifically looking for surrogacy stuff, I would send you there. Also, there are some great Facebook groups, but they also come with some strong opinions and judgment. So I think surrogacy informational groups are helpful on Facebook to read through stuff. There's, really anything you could type into search and, do you want to know what you should put in your contract? Type it into search, but you'll also get a lot of very strong opinions and judgment if you post anything. So, so I say that with a grain of salt. But there are quite a few groups based around surrogacy on Facebook. And then also once we were into the process and we had transferred the embryo, or we knew when we were going to transfer it, I joined a group for other surrogates that had transferred in the fall, which was really great because we were all like kind of going through the same thing together. And there were a lot of questions coming up or experiences coming up that could be shared. I think there were probably like 300 surrogates in my group, maybe 200 and something. But we had like a chat that was very active. And then as people were giving births, everyone was telling their birth stories and we were all excited for each other. So that was really cool too.
That's awesome. I think that's also a really great resource. And that resource sounds a little bit less judgmental than the Facebook one.
Totally. Yes. But it was also really clear sometimes where, people who were in that transfer group didn't have the same knowledge going into surrogacy or like advocacy ability going into it. Cause like things were coming up and you're like, how did you even find yourself in this situation? And so that was really eye-opening to me. Like, oh, your agency didn't help you there. Oh, this should have been part of your contract that was very missed. Oh, wow, your intended parents are like really controlling, how, or some people who like didn't have any contact with their intended parents until they came to get the baby kind of thing. And so it was very eye-opening, like, wow, this journey can look so different than our journey did. So that's just, a bigger statement of like, while we had this amazing journey, that's not always how it happens. And surrogacy can get a really bad rap when it doesn't happen in the way that we experienced it, right? Like there are Netflix series that come out, not documentaries, but like, it's just the fictional world of surrogacy is just so overplayed. Like, oh, the surrogate wants to steal the baby. Yeah. And like, they've got her like shackled in the basement. Like, it's just, there's so much crazy stuff around surrogacy, but not that.
Yeah.
And it can be a really beautiful connection.
Yeah. And you guys are living proof of that.
We are.
I think that's so great. I love that. And I think that, yeah. I mean, the only thing that I can say now is that it's truly amazing. And I'm so happy that it turned out this way for you both. And that the relationship that you guys have is, from what seems like this side of the screen, seems like a forever relationship. And I'm so happy to see that and hear that you guys also can lean on each other during this journey and be so open and honest with each other, and that your families are now blended in a way that could not be mirrored by anyone else. It's your guys' families, and I love that.
Yeah, same. I love it too.
Yeah. Well, Krista and Katie, I am so overwhelmingly honored and thankful that you both decided to share your stories with me today. And all of the listeners, I'm sure everybody is going to just have their hearts fluctuate throughout this entire story, and end on a really positive note. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us and listening and helping us share our amazing story.
Yeah. Thank you for bearing witness to this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Gosh, yeah, my heart is full. And Katie, thank you for doing the initial reach out and saying hey, if you want to hear a surrogacy journey, let me know. I hopped on that like crazy.
Yeah, and if anyone listening is on a surrogacy journey in Washington State and they want a doula, you have to hire me because I am dying to doula a surrogacy birth now.
Yes. So tell us your business info so we can put it for everyone to hear, and we'll put some links to direct them to you.
Awesome. Yeah, my doula / photography / childbirth ed business is Hello Baby. It's hellobabyseattle.com or Hello Baby Seattle on Instagram. And I've shared so much of our journey on Instagram too, which is really fun. You can go back into my stories and see even when I'm in labor, I have videos from labor on there. So and we have lots of photos from our birth photographer posted. And yeah.
Yeah,
so
Katie's an amazing resource for anything birth related, especially surrogacy.
Yeah, I love it. Well, awesome. Thank you both again. And I'm super excited to get this out to the world.
Yay.
Thanks, Kiona.
Thank you, Kiona.
Yeah. Hello to those that are still sticking around. If you made it this far, you are a true MVP. This episode was full of some very raw moments, some of which could be triggering to some of you that are listening, but I appreciate you sticking through and making it to the end to hear the amazing end / new beginning for Krista and Katie. With that said, Krista and Katie, I want to give you and your families a humongous thank you. I am truly honored that you shared your stories with me. It was truly amazing to hear, and I learned so much from both of you. So thank you. I'm sending you and your families a big virtual hug. For next week's episode, I had the super fun opportunity to interview an old classmate from the Midwives College of Utah. Her name is Rebecca Green, and she dives deep into the details of what it was like taking the NARM exam to get her midwifery license, which is an hour away from her home, while in labor. Do you think she made it back home in time to deliver her baby? Tune in next week to find out. But before I let you go, if you like hearing and learning from birth stories like the one you heard today, join the Baki community on Patreon. Become a patron / member for only $3 a month to support the production of this podcast, and to continue to make it possible for me to interview more amazing people and to share their stories. Also, if financially supporting the podcast isn't something that is possible for you, I totally understand. But please share this podcast far and wide and leave a review by writing a small sentence as to why you enjoy it so that the podcast is brought up for others and they can listen to it as well. All right, friends, let's connect again next week. Bye for now.